Fields of children running wild in the sun, like a forest is your child growing wild in the sun. Uh, Good evening, everybody. This is Stone Gasman, live from New York City. And tonight we are going to be doing an audio commentary for the late Douglas Trumbull's 1972 classic Silent Running. And yes, this is the Arrow release that came out in 2020, which I'm very excited to talk about as we watch the film together. I had never seen Silent Running before up until maybe 3 weeks ago. I mean, honestly, I always kind of knew about this film's existence, but of course, when you talk with certain people and you read certain things, and eventually you're going to come to a movie's existence eventually. And honestly, this was a galaxy I had never explored before, to be perfectly honest. I mean, this is a film that Universal put out in 1972, and they were kind of experimenting with million-dollar budgets and filmmakers that hadn't yet set made their mark yet in cinema, and then they were just ready to pump out some kind of story. And this movie came along at like the perfect time for director Douglas Trumbull, because he had worked on 2001: Space Odyssey for Stanley Kubrick, and when he was given this opportunity to direct a film for less than $100 million, of course, he took it under his wing. But anyway, let me go ahead and say hi to everybody in the chat here real quick. We got Dan Shine. Always great to see you, sir. I love Silent Running. Yeah, I wish I could say I was a fan of this movie before 3 weeks ago, but I'm pleased to say when I finally did watch it, I said to myself, wow, that's one of the best sci-fi movies I've ever seen. And so I'm anxious to talk about it. And Rob Gasper, great to see you, sir. It's a groovy 70s sci-fi classic. Yes, definitely groovy in the era of the counterculture and everything. Really looking forward to it. And hello to you, Heidenside. Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's go ahead and get started here. I think we might as well just go ahead and hit play here. So, like I said, I'm paused at the Universal logo for Silent Running, whether you're watching this streaming or on Blu-ray. So we will go ahead and get started here. Countdown on 3, 2, 1, and play. And yes, I am watching the 2020 Arrow Blu-ray Blu-ray release, which has they did an exceptional job upgrading this movie from the standard Blu-ray that was put out years ago by Universal. And we're going to open up here on flowers and foliage. And a very melancholy score. Douglas Trumbull, Michael Gruskoff production of Silent Running. That snail that you see on screen here, I believe that Trumbull grabbed it in his own backyard. But it's certainly a gorgeous image to open up on this movie. I think the story of Silent Running, I think it really begins with 2001: A Space Odyssey. But before we get to that, written by Derek Washburn and Mike Cimino, those names should be very familiar to any of you who are fans of The Deer Hunter, because they both worked on the screenplay for that. And Michael Cimino won Best Director. And then, of course, he did the colossal epic failure Heaven's Gate, which I actually think is a really good movie, and I think it is worth watching, particularly if you can get the Criterion version of that. It's really good. But oddly enough, because of Heaven's Gate's failure, that was part of the reason why MGM wouldn't give any funds to Douglas Trumbull to finish his second and final feature, which we will be doing after Silent Running tonight, called Brainstorm, from 1983, starring Christopher Walken and Natalie Wood. But we'll talk about that pretty much right after Silent Running is over. I'm going to take like a 3-minute break, and then we'll go ahead and jump into Brainstorm. Fluffy rabbits. So yeah, 1968. This was the year essentially that science fiction had matured in terms of film, because we had basically the two big science fiction films that year were 2001: A Space Odyssey and also Planet of the Apes, which of course was a massive hit for 20th Century Fox and inspired at least, well, I mean, to this day, I mean, 4 sequels, a remake, and then a reboot trilogy, which did very, very well. And 2001: A Space Odyssey would get a sequel in 1984 called 2010: The Year We Make Contact. Now, the interesting thing about both those films, though, is that they were both based on novels. They were both based on best-selling novels, while Silent Running is a completely original idea. It's a completely original concept, and that's part of the reason why I think this movie deserves more attention than other sci-fi movies of the period, like Omega Man and Soil and Green, and other films like that. Um, the weird thing is that I did not even know of this movie's existence, I think, until the feature-length Star Wars documentary, where they mention it in terms of that period of when the early 1970s. The studios were even wondering if they were going to get past the decade, because and they started selling all the studios to corporations, but they didn't. I mean, they had no idea. I mean, there was these colossal musical bombs and everything, and they were really on the skids for a few years. And then out of nowhere, this movie called Easy Rider came out. This little independent film with directed by Dennis Hopper and starring Peter Fonda, about these guys on motorcycles that go across country that are looking for the real America. And it remains a very shocking movie. I mean, that the ending to Easy Rider still haunts me to this day. But that was a film that pretty much told Hollywood that, well, we don't understand what these long-haired hippie mofos are doing when it comes to these movies, but they're doing something right, because Easy Rider made like in excess of like $60 million in 1969, when it had a budget of like less than $1 million, and that was a sensational hit. And so Universal got the idea of, well, you know what? Ned Tannen was the head of Universal at the time. And if that name is recognizable to you, they apparently the guys behind Back to the Future, Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale, named Biff Tannen after Ned Tannen, because apparently Bob Gale, when they were doing "I Want to Hold Your Hand" in 1978 for Universal Pictures, I mean, Ned Tannen was apparently such an asshole. I mean, he basically accused Bob Gale of being anti-Semitic, even though he's Jewish. When he made "I Want to Hold Your Hand," which was this crazy movie about the Beatles craze. But Ned Tannen was the head of Universal at this time, and so he got this idea of, okay, why don't we provide funding for 5 to 6 projects? These new up and coming writers and directors and stars, give them freedom, give them complete production freedom to do whatever they want. Leave them alone, less than $1 million. And other films that were part of that package, evidently, were Drive, He Said, which is a film written by Jack Nicholson, which Bruce Dern had also worked on. But he was also in The King of Marvin Gardens as well. And apparently one of the last films as part of this whole deal of 5 or 6 films to be made for less than $1 million was George Lucas's American Graffiti. And here we have shots of the spaceship and the and the domes here containing all the vegetation and wildlife. Okay, so apparently in Silent Running, on the planet Earth, that the temperature has gone up to 78 degrees Celsius, or if you want in Fahrenheit, that's 167 degrees Fahrenheit. So, devastation caused by global warming, and so they send the last surviving uh, foliage that's left in these domes on the spaceship up in the spaceship, and they're heading towards Saturn. And the music there that you're all listening to right now is actually it's a pretty interesting music score, but because it's done by a guy named Peter Shekele, who had worked with Joan Baez and had served as producer on several of her albums. But he was primarily known as as a comedian in the music world, because what he would do is he would make all these riffs on classical musical scores, like with Bach and everything, and he put it under a he put it under a special name called PDQ Bach Recordings, which eventually earned him like 3 consecutive Grammy Awards in like the early 90s and everything. So, but he was working with documentaries around this time as well, and so he was brought on board to do the music for this, and then eventually they would get Joan Baez to record. I'm probably screwing up her last name, I apologize, but they brought her on board to compose a couple of songs, which have become very intimately renowned when it comes to Silent Running's reputation now. It's almost hard not to think of Silent Running and not hear those songs that come into play. One of which is a title tune, Silent Running, and the other which is Rejoice in the Sun. And they were very much characteristic of that of the counterculture era in the 1970s. Now, and these three actors right here who play Bruce Dern's colleagues up on this space station, they're played by these actors called Cliff Potts, Ron Rifkin, and Jesse Vint. And all of them had come basically on recommendation by Bruce Dern from his acting company, from his acting classes and everything. And Douglas Trumbull, of course, who had worked mostly with models and effects for films that he did before this, including 2001, he didn't really work with actors. So he was kind of depending upon Bruce Dern to work with the actors in terms of what he wanted to accomplish with this movie. And these uniforms that you see here, by the way, I mean, they are super cool in an early 1970s retro fashion, and a lot of these patches are either real patches or patches they made up for the movie and everything. But these clothes that they're wearing are actually ski suits, that skiers would use when they were going down mountains and everything. But I mean, Douglas Trumbull actually joked on some of the bonus features. Yeah, you could walk into a store and buy these things. These were not, and a lot of the costumes were, of course, done by Trumbull's girlfriend at the time, who later became his wife. Mm-hmm. And of course, Bruce Dern, who is the star of Silent Running right here, he had made 22 movies before this, although he was never the star of any of those movies. He had actually came out of the world of Roger Corman, and he had done a lot of biker movies and a lot of television shows where he would be the villain and everything. And this was about as perfect as opportunity as ever. And I think he kind of earned this part. I mean, and this part, I mean, this is not exactly the most likable guy you want in a movie, or let alone any kind of movie, uh, because he's going to be doing some pretty bad things later, which we're going to have to accept as part of his character and his obsession with preserving, what's left in terms of uh, of Earth wildlife. And as you can see, yeah, all I mean, his buddies here, they're all happy, and these guys are all friends, by the way. I mean, in the movie, it's not suggested that there's any kind of strained relationship between all of them. They're just really good guys, really good friends, and there's nothing before that kind of indicated that maybe Bruce Stearns' character would go off the rails at this point. But this is when the story does go into motion here. And like I said about Bruce Dern, he made his uncredited debut in a movie in 1960 called Wild River. Then he made his credited debut in a 1962 film called The Crime Busters. But it wasn't until 64 in which he was giving two big studio films by two prominent directors, one of whom was Alfred Hitchcock. And on the commentary, Bruce Stern does mention that he was scared to death about that bird flying to him and landing, and they managed to pull it off without Dern really flinching. Here's the first of the two songs that Joan uh, uh, contributes to the soundtrack, but we'll talk more about Joan later, because she does her second song, which will come near the end of the movie. I think that'll be a perfect time to talk about Joan. But this is uh, one of two songs that are played in the movie, and we also get instrumental versions of these songs as well. I think they work perfectly fine for the material, while also being lovely tunes to listen to on your own accord. But it's amazing that this movie wasn't a hit, and the music didn't really chart the top the charts at the time. But the soundtrack of course became heavily in demand years after this movie came out. But yeah, like as I was saying before, Bruce Dern in 1964, he had done Marnie for Alfred Hitchcock. He played a sailor in that, and he also was in the horror film Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, directed by Robert Aldrich, where he plays the character of John Mayhew. And then, of course, he did The Wild Angels. In 1967, he did some more Roger Corman movies like The St. Valentine's Day Massacre and The Trip, which was also written by Jack Nicholson. In 1969, he had done Support Your Local Sheriff and Castle Keep and The Cycle Savages. And then the key point in his career where he was able to nab the starring role in Silent Running, it came about because of a movie he did in 1969 called They Shoot Horses, Don't They?, which was directed by Sidney Pollack and starring Jane Fonda. And in that movie, or when he was working on that movie, he had gotten a new agent, and his old agent, who happened to be his old agent, managed to get in contact with his new agent and basically said, "Hey, I think we got a perfect lead role for Bruce in this movie called Silent Running, which we're developing over at Universal." And that's how he got it. I mean, there was no audition or anything. He basically just, met Douglas Trumbull at his offices, uh, and basically he was offered the part on the spot because Douglas Trumbull was familiar with his work. I mean, he had already seen some of the movies I had already mentioned before, as well as some television movies that Bruce Dern had also made. And right before this, though, he had done the incredible Two-Headed Transplant, where he was making movies like that. And then this one, I think, came out at a perfect opportunity in his career. because not only was he given the lead role, but he's practically the only one on camera for much of the film. I mean, these guys are not going to be around for much longer. I mean, the guys from Bruce Dern's acting troupe, we're not going to see them see much more of them before long here. Now, as you can see on the uniforms on the side, it says Valley Forge as the as you can see on the patch on the right on their right shoulders. Well, they actually shot on a decommissioned aircraft carrier called the USS Valley Forge. Mm-hmm. The USS Valley Forge, or otherwise known as CV-45, was one of 24 Essex-class aircraft carriers built during shortly after World War II for the United States Navy. The ship was the first Navy ship to bear the name and was named after Valley Forge, the 1777 to 1778 winter encampment of George Washington's Continental Army during the American Revolution. The Valley Forge was commissioned in November of 1946, too late to serve in World War II, but saw extensive service in the Korean War and the Vietnam War, and she was reclassified in the early 1950s as an attack carrier, or CVA, then to an anti-submarine carrier, CVS, and finally to an amphibious assault ship, LPH, carrying helicopters and Marines. As a CVS, she served in the Atlantic and Caribbean, and she was the primary recovery vessel for an early unmanned Mercury space mission. After conversion to an LPH, she served extensively in the Vietnam War. Valley Forge was awarded 8 battle stars for Korean War service and 9 for Vietnam War service, as well as 3 Navy unit commendations. And although she was extensively modified internally as part of her conversion to an amphibious assault ship, external modifications were minor, so throughout her career, Valley Forge retained the classic appearance of a World War II Essex-class ship. She was decommissioned in 1970 and sold for scrap in 1971. While at Long Beach from February 14th to February 28th of 1971, the interior of the aircraft carrier was used as a shooting location for filming the 1972 science fiction film Silent Running. The central location of the film is a 2,000-foot long spacebound cargo freighter carrying 6 large geodesic domes under which the last forests of an environmentally devastated Earth are kept. The producers of the film were searching for pre-existing locations which could represent the cargo deck, control rooms, and living quarters of a fictional quote-unquote space freighter. Building sets on Hollywood sound stages would have been prohibitively expensive, so in order to minimize the impact of the film's minimal budget, various large interior locations were investigated, including warehouses, cargo ships, and oil tankers. After contacting the United States Navy with a query about the use of aircraft carriers, the producers were directed to several decommissioned Essex-class carriers awaiting scrapping at the Long Beach Naval Shipyard, including the Valley Forge, and fellow carriers the USS Philippine Sea and the USS Princeton. The type of location proved to be perfect for the film. The Valley Forge was selected, and a deal was struck with the Navy. In honor of the filming location, the space freighter of the film was christened Valley Forge. The carrier's hangar deck was featured in the film as a cargo hold, which was repainted and filled with polystyrene modules representing futuristic cargo containers. Her flight command area was heavily modified to represent the control room and living quarters of the fictional spaceship crew. Bulkheads were cut out and replaced with wider passageways to allow for camera and actor movement. Set pieces, computer consoles, and various props were moved in to dress the ship as the space freighter. The production crew was allowed to do anything they wanted with the ship as long as no metal was removed. That was the key stipulation the Navy had. You know, you can do whatever you want with it, just don't remove any metal because it's all going to be scrapped. All power and water had to be imported onto the ship, as the crew was not allowed to use ship power, and filming was hampered by the tight confines of the carrier, necessitating several innovations in the filming process. 8 months after filming had wrapped, the Valley Forge was sold for scrap in October of 1971, approximately 5 months before the film was released in March of 72. Hey, Dine Breed, how you doing? Good to see you as well. Yes, indeed. Welcome, welcome. That song couldn't be more 70s if it tried. All props to. I agree, Rob. I agree. I do. Yes, that song couldn't have been more 70s, but I don't know. I still like. Look, I was gonna. All right, I was gonna mention it later, but the truth of the matter is that the reason why I even heard of Joan in the first place was because of her rendition of "The Night They Drove Dixie Down." Now, the band did a wonderful version of that in "The Last Waltz," directed by Martin Scorsese in 1978, which is, excuse me, still my vote for the still my vote for the best concert movie of all time. I mean, it's awesome. But I heard her rendition on the soundtrack of, if you remember the movie Three Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri, starring Frances McDormand. In that movie, it plays during on the soundtrack when when what's his face comes out to get a cigarette. He won the Oscar for the movie as well, and that's the first time I heard Joan's version of that song, and so I almost became an instant fan just because of her version of that song. So to hear her do the songs for these, I mean, I was instantly in love with her voice when I first heard her songs here. Hmm. I mean these are ski suits, but do they work as space suits as well? I mean, they really do. And it's weird because I mean the only other time I ever heard about silent running was on that Star Wars documentary, but all throughout this movie I didn't think about Star Wars once. I mean, it kind of helps when there's no like laser blasters or anything like that, but I never thought of Star Wars, and I love these shots of of the vegetation and the animal life that are interspersed throughout. So going back to Bruce Dern, because after this movie came out, and we'll talk about the reception for this film later, because it was embraced critically in some quarters, but it wasn't a hit. And that might have been stock footage right there. I don't know for sure, but I mean that's also seems like a shot that you would think about as Star Wars. But here again, I didn't think of Star Wars once throughout this movie, which I think is more of an achievement than anything else. But after Silent Running, Bruce Stern would later do The Laughing Policeman in 1973 and The Great Gatsby, the version with Robert Redford in 1974. He was also in Family Plot, Alfred Hitchcock's final movie in 1976. Black Sunday, the John Frankenheimer thriller. And then in 1978, he would reach another pinnacle in his career because he was nominated for an Academy Award for the Hal Ashby drama Coming Home with Jane Fonda and John Voight, both of whom won Oscars, by the way. And I kind of wish Bruce Dern had won right along with them because they were all terrific in it. But that's one of my favorite Bruce Stern's performances right there is in Coming Home. But he was also in a movie called The Driver, where he played the detective. Now, any of you who are fans of the Ryan Gosling thriller Drive should know what The Driver is, because it stars Ryan O'Neal in a role that's very much against type. Last weekend I was talking about Ryan O'Neal with What's Up, Doc. So if you're interested in hearing me talk about Ryan O'Neal, you can go back there, because I'm not going back to Ryan O'Neal anytime soon. But and then in 1981, he did a movie called Tattoo with Maud Adams. Not a lot of people saw that. And then 1989, he did The Burbs, After Dark, My Sweet in 1990, while Mulholland Falls, and Last Man Standing in 1996. And he also played an admiral in the Navy spoof film Down Periscope. And as somebody who served in the Navy for 8 years, I got to tell you that I'm in the minority in that I think that Down Periscope is probably one of the most unfunny movies I've ever seen in my life. I mean, uh, even serving as an electrician and a sonar technician at different points, it still didn't make me like Down Periscope, despite the fact that they were trying to be very close to what Navy personnel were like on ships at that time. But it's a pretty silly movie. But Bruce Dern would also be in the movie Monster uh, with Charlize Theron, where she plays Eileen Wuornos's friend down in Florida who helps her out when she's homeless and everything. Really good in that. And he also gave a voice to Inside Out. He does a lot of voice work too. Um, he's done voice work for Pixar films and the like and everything. And then in 2013, he was nominated for another Academy Award, which I'm still blown away by the fact he didn't win, for the Alexander Payne film Nebraska, which was shot in black and white, where this old guy thinks he's won a lot. He has a winning lottery ticket and everything. Great movie and a great performance. But I think that most people nowadays recognize Bruce Dern from the last 3 films that he did. He was in Quentin Tarantino's last 3 films. He was in Django Unchained, as well as The Hateful Eight, and then finally Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And he is turning 86 in 2 weeks. Bruce Dern is turning 86 in just a couple weeks. And let's put it this way. In the year 2021 alone, he had 6 roles. He had 6 movie roles. So he is still very much working. I mean, in 2022, he has 3 films alone: The Hater, Hellblazers, and he's supposed to be coming out with other films like Chocolate Lizards and a new version of The Most Dangerous Game. And here, Bruce Dern has just committed. He just killed one of his other colleagues, and he's now injured his leg and everything. And this is where the audience's empathy towards Bruce Dern's character, I think, is really tested and perhaps compromised beyond repair. Because even though we understand his obsession with preserving the foliage and preserving all the greens in the domes and everything, he just committed murder. He just killed these guys who were anxious to go home and be with their families again on this planet that has been ravaged by global warming. Who knows what it's really looks like on the planet? But if it has no green or vegetation, that just sucks. That just sucks. And like I said, this was really, this came out the same year that Earth Day was co-founded. Although the interesting thing, what a lot of people don't know about Earth Day is that one of the guys that created Earth Day later went to prison for murder. He was this guy that reportedly had uh, no personal hygiene whatsoever. I mean, he just had this, but yet, I mean, he was still able to get Fortune 500 companies to invest in his ideas, apparently. And I'm not even going to mention his name, but yeah, he was eventually showcased on Unsolved Mysteries when found out that he murdered his girlfriend and put her in a box, and that her corpse had stunk so bad that it was leaking into the apartment down below. And so he was arrested and put on trial. Eventually got bail. More how he got bail for a capital murder, who the hell knows? And then he disappeared for like 20 years in Europe until he was finally caught up, and now he's serving his life sentence for murder. Uh, Not exactly the type of guy you would expect to have co-created Earth Day, but yeah, that's the truth. And I thought I might as well mention that, considering the fact what Bruce Dern's character goes through here, even though he goes through even though his motivations are completely different here. Now, in Douglas Trumbull, it should be stated that reportedly Douglas Trumbull, who of course directed it, and while he did the first draft of the screenplay, it was the script. The final shooting script was more of a hodgepodge of what the other writers had done. There are three other credited writers, like I said, Derek Washburn and Mike Cimino being two of them. But it was sort of a mishmash, and Douglas Trumbull never really intended to make a grand environmental statement with this movie. Um, he never intended to do that, and of course, he never would have dreamt in a billion years that this would have become a cult film, especially in sci-fi circles. He just wanted to tell a story simple enough on the screen where he wouldn't have to work with many actors. And here again, I mean, he primarily just works with Bruce Dern here. And he chose Saturn basically because originally Saturn was supposed to be the destination point in 2001: A Space Odyssey, but due to technical limitations, they weren't able to pull that off, and it became Jupiter. So he made it Saturn here in Silent Running. And the title Silent Running actually refers to, in the United States Navy on submarines, when they dump a lot of debris in the ocean to escape the enemy. That's exactly what they do. I mean, it's called silent running, what they do in the Navy to accomplish that, to actually hide themselves away from the enemy and make them think that they have gone down. And we haven't mentioned the service bots yet here. As a lot of people noted in 1972 when this movie originally came out, they never got the idea that there were actual people in these service robots, but evidently there are. Evidently, there were four people who had lost their lower limbs that were performing inside these performing inside these drones, also known as the service robots, and they would be given the names of Huey, Dewey, and Louie. And yes, that is very, very intentional. The Disney characters, Uncle Scrooge McDuck, and that kind of thing. Those names were very deliberately chosen for all the drones in this movie. But then there were actually four actors that actually were in the drone suits: Mark Persons, Cheryl Sparks, Stephen Brown, and Larry Weisenhunt. And funnily enough, there is a documentary about the making of Silent Running on the DVD, on the Blu-ray, among many other bonus features. And while we don't really get an interview, we do interview the one Cheryl Sparks, and we get to see the others. I mean, and a couple of them were in high school. I mean, on the ship, the Valley Forge, they actually had to. I mean, everything was in there. There was a cafeteria in there. There was showers, running water. There were beds. There were the sets, and there were also schoolrooms specifically so that they could attend school while working on this movie to get all together. But tragically, yeah. I mean, these four actors, like one of them was a high school student that lost his legs in a train accident, very very sadly. There were a couple others that lost their limbs in Vietnam, and that they were in the suits as well. But the whole idea that came to Douglas Trumbull to how we can pull off having these service robots appear like they have no human control whatsoever. Douglas Trumbull was reminded of a very famous, very legendary 1932 film directed by Todd Browning called Freaks, which featured a character named Johnny Eck, who would walk with his arms only. He did not have lower limbs. And of course, in that movie, there were many other circus performers that like the bearded lady and stuff like that. All these so-called freaks in the movie. Although the real freaks were actually the human circus performers that were mocking them and hazing them on a daily basis. Those were the real freaks of the movie. Now, this is a movie that was released by MGM, and they wanted to compete with the Universal monster movies of the time. And let's just say, I mean, there are allegedly stories that one woman had a miscarriage when they saw the movie Freaks in 1932, and as a result, the original version, which was 90 minutes long, was severely cut. It was pulled by MGM and severely cut by the studio, and all that's left that we have today is a 64-minute version, which is really which is a real shame, because evidently, like, at the end of the movie, there was supposed to be like one of the humans evidently was castrated by the freaks as they all finally gang up on them and get their revenge and everything. But since January of 1932, nobody has seen that original version of Freaks that ran 90 minutes, and that's a great loss to film history, I think. But in 1972, I mean, evidently there were a lot of people that completely bought the fact that these drones were actually service robots that had no human control whatsoever. And now we know, and they are given credit in the end credits, all four of them, Mark Person, Cheryl Sparks, Stephen Brown, and Larry Weisenhunt, all of them had controlled the service robots, and bravo to them. I applaud them. I mean, they did a fantastic job here of making the audience believe that they were legitimate service robots. And I mean, I suppose you could see a tad bit of inspiration from C3PO and R2D2 in them. I honestly never saw that. I honestly did not see even R2D2. I didn't even see R2D2 in these robots. I mean, to me, these are completely original creations. And Douglas Trumbull, evidently, before he passed away earlier this year, he had those robots in his personal collection. And I don't know if they're going to be auctioned off or what's going to happen to him now. But apparently he held on to all those robots. Mm-hmm. Just to let everybody know, we are approximately 41 minutes into silent running. So if you want to jump to the 41-minute mark, that's where I'm at, and we will continue with silent running here. So we're almost halfway through the movie. I mean, this is a short movie. This movie is only 89 minutes, which I think actually works fine considering the fact that it's a very simple story. And it has to be, like I said, the effects have to stun, I think, more than anything else. And of course, you have to have a damn good actor to pull, a performance like this off. And of course, they found it in Bruce Dern here. Now, I'm going to talk about for a while. I'm going to talk about this Arrow Blu-ray release, which, if any of you are thinking of picking this up, I highly recommend it. In the booklet, there are a couple of essays. One of them, which is Silent Running, Douglas Trumbull's Visions of Nature, written by Barry Forshaw, who also contributes to the... he's also on a new audio commentary that is on this Blu-ray. I just want to quote him from his essay here. Trumbull was born in Los Angeles on April 8th, 1942. He attended an architectural course at El Camino College in Torrance, California, a training that involved design and drawing, both of which were to serve him well in his future career. He had made a mark as a very young man, and for a time, architecture seemed to be where his future lay. But Trumbull simultaneously developed a talent for illustration, which he parlayed into an employment with advertising companies. There were harbingers of his later career in the animation projects he completed for NASA, including Apollo project films for the Air Force and a film for the New York World's Fair in 1964, To the Moon and Beyond, which was completed when Trumbull was working for a company called Graphic Films. This was seen by Stanley Kubrick, who realized that Trumbull was the man to help him on the massive and secretive new science fiction project he was preparing. Trumbull, intrigued, flew to England to work with Kubrick. It was in the UK that Trumbull collaborated with such British technicians as Wally Weavers and Tom Howard, and began to refine many of the techniques that he used both in 2001 and in subsequent works, such as the science fiction film he was to direct. After working on the credits of the ill-advised film adaptation of Terry Southern's novel Candy in 1968, Trumbull produced more spectacular work on one of the most intelligent science fiction films of the era, Robert Wise's The Andromeda Strain. Now, I'm going to pause there and say, I saw The Andromeda Strain for the very first time only about a year or two ago. It's probably the slowest science fiction movie you're ever likely to see, and yet I was riveted by it. There was something about it, even though it went at a snail's pace. I mean, it went about the pace as the snail that opens up Silent Running, practically. But I have to admit, I was fascinated by it. And yes, it is about a virus that comes from alien origins, and these scientists have to figure out where those origins are, and of course how to get a vaccine for the public. And of course, this was one of those movies that was brought up after COVID-19 hit as movies that were about viruses. Another one was the Steven Soderbergh picture with Matt Damon. I'm trying to remember the name off the top of my head, and I can't, unfortunately. During this, an idea for a film that would be his own personal project began to germinate. It would feature an astronaut with 3 robots on a spaceship that had been designed to preserve and transport forests and other botanical material through space. With the encouragement of the agent Michael Gruskoff, who also served as the producer, by the way, Trumbull expanded this slim notion into a workable screen treatment. Crucial to his early concept were the 3 drones and their relationship with the astronaut, and it was this idea that Trumbull developed along with Michael Cimino prior to his alternately successful and disastrous career as a film director, Derek Washburn and Stephen Bochco, before his hit TV cop show Hill Street Blues. What had particularly intrigued Trumbull was the notion of creating a robot that, unlike virtually all of its filmic predecessors, would not look like a man in a suit. The Todd Browning movie Freaks had demonstrated that people with missing limbs could walk on their hands, and Trumbull realized that a robotic body might be designed to utilize this fact. In this regard, Trumbull was spectacularly successful, and audiences were surprised to see credits at the end of the film with human names for the drones. Most viewers had simply accepted the film robots as machines. In other words, they were tricked by the sleight of hand, just as Trumbull intended. Interestingly, the amputees who brought to life the drones managed to give real character to the automatons they were animating, even though not an inch of human flesh was visible. 100%. 100%. Having secured funding, Trumbull began to move the project forward in a workshop and office he had put together in Canoga Park, Los Angeles, and started to consider actors for the crucial role of the astronaut who would be left alone with the robots on the botanical spaceship. It's hard at this juncture, when the actor Bruce Dern is such an institution in both mainstream and independent American cinema, to remember when he was relatively little known. But Trumbull had seen some of Dern's earlier work and realized he was the perfect choice for the part. Apart from anything else, Dern resisted the temptation to play his character Freeman Lowell for easy sympathy. Although audiences of the day were already receptive to the ecological message of the film as espoused by Lowell, something ironically that is even more apropos in the 20th century than when the film was made. Dern and his director, Trumbull had now decided to take up the directing reins himself, made the character short-tempered and hectoring, so that even when set against his largely unsympathetic fellow astronauts, who are perfectly happy when the order comes to destroy the flying force so they can return home, we are only half on his side. There is, of course, the small matter of the 3 murders that Lowell commits in order to preserve at least a fragment of the forest in which he has devoted years of his life. In fact, it would have been a very different film if a more high-wattage, sympathetic star had been hired. Yes. And like I said, this 2020 Arrow Video Blu-ray, it is region-free, so you can watch it on Region 1 players. It has a brand new 2K restoration from the original camera negative, approved by director Douglas Trumbull, and produced by Arrow Video exclusively for this release. High-definition 1080p Blu-ray presentation, original lossless mono audio, optional English subtitles for the deaf and hard of hearing, brand new commentary by critics Kim Newman and Barry Forshaw. I just quoted Barry Forshaw from one of his essays there, and he's written a lot of books. I mean, the new commentary that was commissioned for this Blu-ray was by a couple authors, and they provide plenty of information, particularly since they had actually seen Silent Running when it came out in 1972. There is also an audio commentary which was recorded in 2000 by director Douglas Trumbull and actor Bruce Dern together. Here again, one of the main reasons to pick up this Blu-ray. Isolated music and effects track, No Turning Back, a new interview with film historian Jeff Bond on the film's score. First Run, a new visual essay by writer-filmmaker John Spira exploring the evolution of Silent Running screenplay. The Making of Silent Running, which is an archival 1972 on-set documentary. That runs about 50 minutes. It's a pretty long documentary, but a lot of great information on it. Silent Running by Douglas Trumbull, and Douglas Trumbull Then and Now, 2 archival interviews with the film's director, a conversation with Bruce Dern, an archival interview with the film's lead actor, a theatrical trailer, an extensive behind-the-scenes gallery, reversible sleeve featuring original and newly commissioned artwork by Eric Roper. Yeah, as you can see, there's the new artwork right there. And on the slip, there is the original artwork. So yeah, highly recommend, if you're a fan of this movie, pick up this 2020 Blu-ray, because before a 4K comes out, this is going to be as good as it gets when it comes to Silent Running, both visually and in terms of bonus material. So I highly recommend you pick up this Blu-ray if you are a fan of the movie. Absolutely. Anybody in the chat, please let me know your thoughts on Silent Running. Anything you particularly love about it? Any favorite things about it? I mean, what this movie means to you? How you discovered it? I mean, love to hear anything you all have to say about Silent Running here. So we're 51 minutes in. Well, actually, I'm going to go ahead and say 52 minutes in. We're about 52 minutes in. So if you need to jump to silent running, there you go. Just jump to 52 minutes. And so we got about 38 minutes left here to go. And I'm going to be watching Brainstorm, which is the only other film that Douglas Trumbull directed. I'm going to be watching that on Amazon Prime. There is a Blu-ray out there for Brainstorm, although it has no bonus features on it. It's completely bare bones. It was put out by Warner Brothers, I think, over a decade ago. So, but I'll be watching Brainstorm on Amazon Prime. And even if you don't completely empathize with Bruce Dern as a character, I mean, he still gives a very moving performance. I mean, you're completely absorbed by his passion and determination to preserve what's left of of uh, of the foliage from Earth. I mean, you completely understand all that. Here they are, he's barrowing. Mm, mm. Now, and like I said, we'll be doing Brainstorm here a bit later. Mm-mm-mm. Douglas Trumbull's responsibilities and talents grew as the production continued, and he became one of four special effects supervisors on the film. And we're talking about 2001: A Space Odyssey here. Trumbull's most memorable contribution was the development of slit scan photography process used in the Stargate sequence. Quote, I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. We were struggling with the Stargate. Nobody knew what a Stargate was, but I came up with some ideas, and I didn't even know at the time were based on some things I was learning as a young guy about street photography and weird photographic techniques, unquote. He created the Stargate by building a 6 foot tall sheet of rotatable metal and a cut of narrow slit in it. The sheet was placed in front of a 12-foot long backlit glass panel through which lighting patterns were shown. With a long camera exposure, the kaleidoscope of lights appear to be darting towards the camera from a single point. Trumbull and Kubrick wanted the audience to feel like they were on the adventure themselves and immersed in the film by participating. This approach eventually led to the IMAX system of high-resolution projection, which Trumbull helped to develop. Working on 2001 hooked Trumbull on the concept of producing immersive film experiences on huge screens, ironically at a time when the industry was moving towards the multiplexing of theaters with smaller screens. Although Trumbull's association with Kubrick was a huge boost for his career, he swore afterwards that he would, quote, never work for somebody else again, in part because Kubrick was, quote, a hell of a taskmaster. His level of quality control bordered on perfectionism. The film earned an Oscar for Best Special Effects, but the award went solely to Kubrick, with Trumbull receiving none of the accolade for his work. This led to threats of legal action, and the two men did not speak for a decade. Trumbull said that after Kubrick's death, that Kubrick was a genius and someone Trumbull missed terribly. In 1969, Trumbull was filming the annual Flying Saucer Convention in Giant Rock, California, and this evolved into a full-length project initially called Giant Rock Rutabaga Deluxe, and then Saturation 70, an ecological horror fantasy. The star of the film was a 5-year-old Jason Jones, who was the son of Brian Jones of Rolling Stones fame. The story involved Jones losing his mother in a giant garbage dump and wandering a desolate planet looking for her, while being menaced by gas masked garbage men and helped by a fairy godmother in a sequin cowgirl creation by Nudie. Some footage includes a battle between a Green Beret and a Viet Cong in a supermarket. Trumbull's partner on the film was Anthony Fouts. A company called Dimension 5 took over backing of the film. Having returned to Hollywood, Trumbull set up his own company and subsequently bid on the job to produce special effects for the science fiction film The Andromeda Strain. I was a young guy and very naive, and I seriously underbid the job. I had no idea what these things were supposed to cost. I nearly went bankrupt as a result. Trumbull and associate James Short produced dozens of shots, including the electron microscope pictures of the Andromeda organism and various on-screen readouts. Though many of these look like computer graphics, they were created using techniques Trumbull had used for 2001. Author Michael Crichton and director Robert Wise were very much impressed with Trumbull's work. Now, let's take a break from talking about Douglas Trumbull because the second of Jones' songs is now playing in the movie here. Wind upon his face and my fingers in his hair. There's the conservation pledge. I give my pledge as an American to save and faithfully to defend from the waste the natural resources of my country, its soil and minerals, its forests, its waters, and wildlife. And there was a documentary that was nominated for an Academy Award, I think about I forget what year it came out, but it came out about 10 years ago, and it was about fracking and how fracking had done a lot of damage across the country, not only in terms of destroying people's water supplies, but also, these corporations that basically just fight it in court and just do these big, massive payoffs. But the people that are affected still are left with ruined health and tampered water supplies. And the movie, it was called Gasland. It was by a guy named Josh Fox, who basically traveled the United States and he documented all of these cases. And at the end, it really, really showed a very grim view of the country's future in terms of how we are treating natural resources. I mean, one of the things I've come to just in my own beliefs. I mean, I don't like to get into labels or anything like that, and I don't want to label myself as anything. Although the thing is that I would never buy bottled water because of the fact that, wait a minute, these bottled water companies are essentially stealing water out of the ground, which is not only a precious natural resource, but it should be made available clean and free for everybody on this planet. But of course, corporations with profit motives don't share that sympathy, and so they'll just steal the water out of the ground and sell it for a price. I mean, if we were like in a serious devastation, or even a couple of years ago during the pandemic, I mean, I don't give a damn. If there's one thing I would steal, it's water, because I do believe in the future we will have water wars. It's like what Robin Williams said during one of his stand-ups. I mean, this shit is going to be more precious than oil. Yeah, seriously. Wait a few years. We're going to have wars over water. I absolutely, absolutely believe that is going to happen. And of course, you got the rainforests, and I wish I had done this commentary on Arbor Day, which was a few weeks ago. I think it would have been a perfect day to do a silent running commentary, because I got to admit that when I first watched this movie only a couple weeks ago, I'm still taken aback at how touched I was at how you have this guy, and he's with these service robots, and they're near they're near the planet of Saturn. They just went through the rings and shit, and now they're just focused on saving what's left of plant life and animal life, all in these little domes. I mean, I here again, even without empathizing with Bruce Dern's character, you understand his motivation, and you understand why he is so determined to do what he's doing. And this is this movie was rated G. I mean, it's like 2001, it was rated G as well. Is that and this is not exactly a family friendly movie, although I think open minded and smart kids could watch this and could get a lot out of it. I'd certainly rather show kids in schools today something like Silent Running rather than something like Scooby Doo, which would be a waste of time. At least with Silent Running, they would learn something. But I mean, I was taken aback at how good this film was. I think it's one of the best science fiction films of the 70s. I mean, it may not be quite up there with Alien, and I know that people would make arguments for like Soylent Green or Star Wars, which is space fantasy, of course, and I can understand those arguments, but this is seriously an accomplishment here, considering less than $1 million budget, and Douglas Trumbull, he was guiding by all his experience working with Kubrick and working on documentaries and other things. A pool table. So yeah, I mean, this Silent Running, it did not make a lot of money when it came out. I mean, in fact, I think it just made over its budget. And see, the weird thing was is that Douglas Trumbull, he gives full credit to Universal. He gives full credit to Universal in that when they saw the film, they had no issues with it. They didn't ask for any cuts. They were perfectly fine with the movie. They liked the movie. They actually did like the movie after they saw it. But what they figured was, let's put out this movie with no promotion, because maybe it will build based on word of mouth and everything. Well, unfortunately, that wasn't really the case. Now, I think there were a lot of kids in the 70s that saw Silent Running, and I think it made a mark with their film education and their experiences at the time. And I can completely understand why. I mean, here again, you're talking to somebody that did not discover Silent Running until 2022. And I was blown away by what Douglas Trumbull accomplished in 1972 when he made this movie. And of course, my Navy experience. I mean, I was also attracted to the whole Valley Forge location shooting and everything, and really got more out of this than I ever expected, to be perfectly honest. I mean, here again, I was really touched by the end of this movie. Okay, we are 1 hour and we're about 20 seconds shy of the 1 hour 6 minute mark. 1 hour and 6 minutes. So we have approximately 23 minutes left here to go. Mm-hmm. I've seen Gasland. Yeah, not a lot of people saw Gasland, but that is a very, very important and a very, very scary movie. In fact, they even made a sequel, Gasland Part 2. And I don't think he made a third film. I think he made another movie that is sort of related. I mean, Josh Fox, hold on a minute. That's right. He made a movie in 2016 called How to Let Go of the World and Love All the Things Climate Can't Change. I haven't seen that particular movie yet. I've only seen his Gasland movies, but but he's contributed to as a journalist to like Rolling Stone and the Daily Beast and the Huffington Post and stuff like that. And he's very much against corporations and their quest to make as much profit as possible, especially at the expense of the environment. But it's lovely to see you, Jamie, as always. Absolutely. Brainstorm is awesome. Haven't seen it in years. Yes, yes. We're going to start Brainstorm pretty much about, I would say about 10:35 p.m., so in about 25 minutes here. I'm going to take a 3-minute break as soon as Silent Running is finished, and I will be back, and we'll talk about Brainstorm. And it is on Amazon Prime, like I said. I'm still shocked at how little seen Brainstorm is. I mean, Silent Running, a lot of people actually remember Silent Running and, different aspects about this movie, like the domes and the service robots and those type of things, but not a lot of people remember Brainstorm. Not a lot of people saw it when it came out in theaters, which is a great shame because that's how it's supposed to be experienced in a theater. I saw it in 78 at 7 years old and was mesmerized. Probably the first film that truly challenged me. Yeah, I can definitely see that. And see, the weird thing is for a lot of people, Silent Running was the film that did that. To me, it was 2001. Because I first saw 2001 when I was, about 6, 7 years old. And I mean, my father had to explain a couple things to me and help me along with it. But basically, yes, I got the whole idea that once the apes in the beginning touch the monolith, that's where they get thought for the first time. That's where they actually start to their brains get powered up and they actually start getting ideas. And so when they pick up the piece of bone to use it as a weapon against the other apes at the watering hole, that's how that whole thing comes up in their minds. And so they start to think for the first time. And like when he the famous transition when he throws the bone up into the air and it morphs into a space station. Well, yeah, the tools of yesterday versus the tools of today. And what particularly freaked me out about 2001 was the whole notion that this computer, this HAL 9000 computer, can pretty much kill these crew members by cutting off their life support and then proceed to kill the other 2 astronauts that are out there working in space. And that the irony is that he's doing it to protect the human race. The great irony is that the HAL 9000 commits those murders to protect the human race. So, oh, and by the way, not a lot of people know that where they came up with the name of HAL for the HAL 9000 computer. The letter after H is I. The letter after A is B. And the letter after L is M. So they basically went down one letter from each of the letters of I, B, M. I saw Brainstorm on HBO or Showtime when I was about 10 or 11. Natalie Wood and Christopher Walken, yes, jumping into people's minds, right up my alley. Yeah, I can't wait to talk about Brainstorm. There's going to be a lot to talk about with Brainstorm. In fact, I'll be perfectly honest with you. As much as I love Silent Running, the truth is with Brainstorm, there's a much more that we need to discuss because of the whole, Natalie Wood controversy and all that. But also just because Brainstorm needs to be seen by more people. It seems like few people are aware of the movie's existence, which, here again, I mean, I wanted to do both of these commentaries in tribute to director Douglas Trumbull, who is not a household name, and yet he worked on the effects for 2001, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Star Trek the Motion Picture, and of course, Blade Runner. I mean, he is, his name is landmark when it comes to visual effects. It really is, and it needs to be celebrated. So I was going to talk a little bit about Joan Baez. Is it Baez? I think it's Baez. Joan Baez. Yeah. Because she contributed 2 songs to the soundtrack here. And she's basically known for her contemporary folk music, often includes songs of protest and social justice. She performed publicly for over 60 years, releasing over 30 albums. Fluent in Spanish and English, she has recorded songs in at least 6 other languages. She's generally regarded as a folk singer, but her music is diversified into the counterculture era of the 60s and encompasses genres such as folk rock, pop, country, and gospel music. She began her recording career in 1960 and achieved immediate success. Her first 3 albums, Joan Baez Volume 2, and Joan Baez in Concert, all achieved gold record status. Although a songwriter herself, Baez generally interprets other composers' work, having recorded songs by the Allman Brothers Band, the Beatles, Jackson Browne, Leonard Cohen, Woody Guthrie, Violetta Parra, the Rolling Stones, Pete Seeger, Paul Simon, Stevie Wonder, Bob Marley, and many others. She was one of the first major artists to record the songs of Bob Dylan in the early 1960s. She also had a relationship with Bob Dylan throughout that time. And Baez was already an internationally celebrated artist and did much to popularize his early songwriting efforts. On her later albums, she found success interpreting the work of more recent songwriters, including Ryan Adams, Josh Ritter, Steve Earle, Natalie Merchant, and Joe Henry. Baez's acclaimed songs include Diamonds and Rust and covers of Phil Oakes's There But For a Fortune and the band's The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down, which is what I mentioned before in the movie 3 Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri. That's the song that plays when why is that I can't keep forgetting his name, and he's so awesome. I shouldn't be forgetting his name. Sam Rockwell. When Sam Rockwell exits the bar and he notices the license plate of what the guy is driving that he suspects possibly raped and murdered Frances McDormand's daughter, that's the song that plays as he's going outside and smoking a cigarette. But I actually really love that version of the song. I really do. Joan Baez is also known for Farewell Angelina, Love is Just a 4-Letter Word, Forever Young, Here's to You, Joe Hill, Sweet Sir Galahad, and We Shall Overcome. Baez performed 14 songs at the 1969 Woodstock Festival and has displayed a lifelong commitment to political and social activism in the fields of nonviolence, civil rights, human rights, and the environment. And that tells you right there that she was already absolutely committed to doing this movie and to doing these songs, because after she read the script, she just basically loved what was written and knew that this was a very powerful film in terms of preserving and protecting the environment. So makes sense. It makes perfect sense why she would be drawn to this film. Mm-hmm. And she was finally inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame on April 7th, 2017. She's 81 years old now, and she lives in retirement in California. So yeah, accomplished a lot during her lifetime, quite a bit. But as far as I'm concerned, I think I'll pretty much always know her from the songs that she does for Silent Running, including the title song and Rejoice in the Sun. In late 1971, she reunited with composer Peter Schickele to record two tracks, Rejoice in the Sun and Silent Running, for the science fiction film. The 2 songs were issued as a single on Decca 32890. In addition to this, another LP was released on Decca DL 79188 and was later reissued by Varese Saraband on black and green vinyl. In 1998, a limited release on CD by the Valley Forge Record Group was released. Of course, Valley Forge, of course, is also the name of the ship that they used for the interiors in Silent Running, so it makes perfect sense. That was obviously a music group that was obviously committed to getting her music and the soundtrack out there for people to buy. Absolutely. Mm. This is actually really sad to see all this foliage dying. It's really, really sad. Oh man, they had a lot of cantaloupe. A lot of cantaloupe was a staple on board here. The cinematographer, his name was Charles F. Wheeler, and he was responsible for a lot of the animations that you see on the screens to in adding to the effects. Okay, to do one more timestamp here, we are 1 hour and 19 minutes into Silent Running, so about just 10 minutes left here to go. And I've kind of already run out of things to say about Silent Running. I'm sorry to say. Okay, thank you. Yes, Joan Baez. You know, with certain names, I always feel I know I should double check how to pronounce them, but I'm always in a rush doing this research. So it's Joan Baez. Yes, thank you, Joan Baez. Yes, thank you, thank you. Uh, Berkshire to Valley Forge. Mighty glad to see you, boy. What you been doing up there? We've looked high and low for you. I mean, that's the thing. The combination of Bruce Dern's performance, the excellent special effects, and the performances of the sentient robots and the Joan Baez songs, I think that's a great combination, and I think it works. They all work in this movie. Yeah, it's a real shame this wasn't a hit when it came out. And it wasn't like 2001, which was basically word of mouth. And of course, that movie became infamous back then because a lot of the hippies want to go there and take the ultimate trip by smoking weed before every showing. I actually did that when I went to go see it for its 50th anniversary. Like I said, the one stipulation the U.S. Navy had when they were filming on board the Valley Forge was don't take any metal. We're going to sell it for scrap. Don't take any metal. Legend. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for anybody that's just joining in, we are approximately at the 1 hour, 21 minute, and 30-second mark for Silent Running. So we got about 7, 8 minutes left here before it ends, and we'll go ahead start Brainstorm here in a few more minutes. Well, one thing's for sure when it comes to Silent Running is that I'll never forget the poster of just Bruce Dern and one of the robots just shining his light on the plant coming out of the ground. And this, of course, is the climactic scene where Bruce Dern is going to say goodbye to Huey and Dewey. I've taught you everything that I know about taking care of the forest down here. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he just committed three murders. There's no way in hell that Earth is going to let him back into their quote unquote good graces after committing three murders. But, I mean, and this is it's a very downbeat, sad ending. But for a science fiction film like this, it's perfectly appropriate. I mean, if you really want to try downbeat, go ahead and check out Beneath the Valley of the Apes, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, excuse me, where at the end, Charlton Heston literally blows up the planet. He just says screw it and just blows up the planet. No more sequels for this franchise. We're not going to do that. Oh, Louie and Dewey. That's right. Huey was the one that was broken earlier, and so it doesn't operate anymore. So he's just saying goodbye to the last two of the service robots. And I'll be certainly keeping those Joan Baez songs in my playlists now from now on because they're really nice songs. I mean, so in building up to Brainstorm, let's talk about what when Silent Running was released. Insiders were astonished that the finished film had been produced for so little money. Lead actor Bruce Dern compared Trumbull's creative vision to that of Alfred Hitchcock, with whom Dern had also worked. Trumbull was seen as one of Hollywood's up and coming young directors. I mean, he was only 27 when he made this. Pretty impressive accomplishment. Although a critical success, Silent Running was a flop at the box office. Trumbull recalled that, quote, it was just such a great experience for me as a filmmaker, but I didn't know that I was part of an experiment by Universal Studios to see if it was possible to have a movie survive on word of mouth alone without an advertising campaign. It was not, and Silent Running's environmental message struck a chord, though, and the movie has since become a cult classic. After Silent Running, Trumbull developed a number of movie projects, but a series of misfortunes and bad luck kept them from getting beyond the initial development stage. One project nearly did get into production and was already being cast when it was abruptly scuttled. The investor had decided to abandon the movie business and build a Las Vegas casino instead. Ugh. Trumbull described this period of his career as, quote, development hell. Unable to live on development fees alone and needing money, Trumbull returned to creating special effects, including some uncredited work using blue screen techniques on the 1974 film The Towering Inferno, which was a huge commercial hit. In 1975, Trumbull turned down an offer to provide the effects for George Lucas's Star Wars. Very famously, yeah, he turned down Star Wars. But his colleague who did work on Silent Running with him, John Dykstra, did become the primary visual effects artist on Star Wars and later won an Academy Award for his work, even though he was fired by George Lucas halfway through production. But anyway, in 1977, Douglas Trumbull contributed the effects to Close Encounters of the Third Kind for Steven Spielberg. And in late 1978, Trumbull's Future General Corporation, a research special effects house that was funded by Gulf and Western and Paramount Pictures, was offered the job to produce the special effects for Star Trek the Motion Picture. Trumbull, already deeply involved in Close Encounters, refused, wanting instead to focus his efforts on the patented show scam process. We'll talk about that during Brainstorm, a high speed, large format movie process that provided unprecedented visual clarity. Paramount awarded the contract to Effects House, Robert Abel and Associates, and in a move seen by some as payback for Trumbull's refusal to take on the project, all but shuttered Future General. Robert, early in 1979, and with principal photography nearly finished and a December release date looming, Abel was fired after failing to produce even a few seconds of usable footage. Paramount then approached Douglas Trumbull to take over effects production, which Trumbull did after securing an agreement to be released from his contract at Paramount upon completion of the film. At the time, he recalled, quote, "I think they would have entertained anyone who could have pulled them out of the jam that they were in." Trumbull reassembled his Future General team, rebuilt his facility, which Paramount had nearly gutted, and with a mere 6 months to create the hundreds of effect shots needed, worked virtually around the clock for months. His team made the date, but their in-house battle cry became crop it, flop it, or drop it. And that is reuse part of the existing scene, take an existing scene, or flop it over so that the right to left shot of the ship now plays the other way, or drop the ship from the script altogether. As Trumbull told Wolfram Hanneman of in70mm.com, there were as many shots in the movie as Close Encounters and Star Wars combined. There were 650 shots, which had to be completed in 6 months, and we all worked 24 hours a day for 6 months, 7 days a week, around the clock to get that movie done. I ended up in the hospital. It was a major recovery. I had ulcers, all kinds of exhaustion because I was working 7 days a week, almost living in the studio, not getting enough sleep. And then in 1981, Trumbull directed the special effects for the Ridley Scott film Blade Runner. But at any rate, I'm going to go ahead and pause there. This is the final shot of Douglas Trumbull's Silent Running. I'm going to take a 6-minute break. We're going to take a 6-minute break here. I will be back at 10:40 p.m. Eastern Time, and we will go ahead and start on Brainstorm. In fact, I will be paused at the MGM logo for Brainstorm as soon as I get back. So just give me 6 minutes, and I'll be right back. Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. We are back. We just finished a commentary for Silent Running, the 1972 film directed by Douglas Trumbull. And now we're about to watch his second and only other movie. He only directed two films in his career. While he's primarily known for his, of course, landmark visual effects in 2001, A Space Odyssey and Close Encounters and Blade Runner, he would only direct two films, and this second film, unfortunately, was marked by a very real world tragedy because the female lead of the movie, Natalie Wood, passed away while there was a break in the production. And let's just say that it almost resulted in the film not being released at all. And we'll get into all that. I mean, MGM was pretty determined to kill this movie from the outset, right after Natalie Wood died under very mysterious circumstances. And eventually, thankfully, because Douglas Trumbull had a stipulation in his contract that said, no, 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 no. This film needs to be finished and it needs to be, but MGM was not willing to provide any funding. They categorically refused to throw any money to finish the movie after Natalie Wood's death. And so they had to bring in an insurance company who agreed to pay for the rest of the film. And MGM kind of cowered at that point and was like, okay, you know what, we'll go ahead and agree to this. Although, of course, later we realized that they did not do any promotion for the movie whatsoever. But at any rate, just to say hi to real quick anybody that's out in the chat, including CO2 Dave 1. Good to see you, sir. And Katrina, always lovely to see you as well. Welcome to this audio commentary for Brainstorm. I am currently paused at the MGM logo for Brainstorm, and I will go ahead and get started at the count of three here. So just 1 second. Okay. So at the count of three, we'll go ahead and press play. 3, 2, 1, and play. Leo the Lion roaring at us to let us know that we are about to watch a movie here. And like I said, this is not a film that's considered high up on MGM's films, because the truth of the matter is, when this came out in 1983, and here again, this was 2 years after Natalie Wood had passed away under mysterious circumstances, they refused to do any promotion. So not a lot of people saw this in the theater, and the sad thing is that it was always meant to have this massive theatrical release because of Douglas Trumbull's show scan process, which we will go into as the movie goes along. But here we have this very, very awesome opening credit sequence with all the names and the effects there in the background. COT Dave 1 saw the film when it first came out at the Ziegfeld Theater in New York City. Oh, man. Well, you know what? I mean, please let us know what you thought of the movie when you saw it when it came out at that time. Please let us know what you thought. And also, could you also answer if what was the entire mood at the time? Because obviously with Natalie Wood's death, it obviously cast a shadow on this movie for 2 years as it was being edited. These two guys, they spent 2 years editing this movie to what we see on the screen. And I'm just glad that we finally got the movie. I mean, regardless of what the tragic circumstances are. Story by Bruce Joel Rubin, who later was responsible for winning the Oscar for Ghost. And we will mention Robert Stitzel, the screenwriter, several times throughout this commentary. And produced and directed by Douglas Trumbull. Yes. It had a really bad one-sheet poster. An anonymous woman hooked up to a machine with a big smile on her face, blurry, dark, and unappealing. You know what? I'm inclined to agree with you, sir. I'm actually very, because that poster also doesn't say anything about the movie, really. And of course, back then on movie posters, they always put like at least 15 words on it, so that you expected uh, the ticket buyer to actually read what it says on the poster and make a commitment to actually buying a ticket for the movie. I mean, well, I was impressed at the change in aspect ratio between real life and seen through the machine. Yeah, we will definitely point that out when it comes to it. Oh man, I love these visuals. Yeah, see, this is Super Panavision 70 widescreen that was used for these particular shots of the quote unquote real life experiences that are being recorded onto these tapes. You know, the apparently you can record any human experience that you want on these tapes. That's the whole crux of this science fiction idea. And here we have Christopher Walken and probably his most normal performance in any movie ever. I mean, it's kind of weird seeing him as kind of this bland scientist guy. There's nothing colorful about him. He doesn't ever go into that walking craziness that we love him for, like in such films as The Deer Hunter, which we were talking about before, because Derek Washburn and Michael Cimino both co-wrote Silent Running. So there's a little bit of a connection there. It was incredible to watch. I don't remember being a crowded theater. Yep, yep. And Louise Fletcher is really good in the film. Oh yes, Louise Fletcher. This is her best work since One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and she was really in a down period at this point because I mean she had just shot a horrible comedy in Europe, which nobody saw, called Mama Dracula, where she played somebody that was descended from. Oh my God, I got to look this up because it's so goofy. I mean, look, I want to get this over with when it comes to Louise Fletcher, because the thing is that she is actually a really good actress, and I do think that she deserved that Oscar 100%. But look, right before right before Brainstorm, she did a movie called Mama Dracula in Belgium. And the story relates how Mama Dracula, a character based on the life story of Countess Bathory, an enthusiast of rejuvenation baths consisting of the blood of young virgins, must come to terms with a shortage of such blood in the modern era. It's meant to be a comedy, and it's not very funny, and it probably has a pair of twins that are more scarier than the twins in The Shining, and that's quite an epic feat to accomplish. But I'm not joking about it. These guys are freaky, and it's a terrible movie. I mean, the only thing I remember about watching it was Louise Fletcher. She has to send these twin goons out to these fashion stores that she has and everything, and they would just go in the dressing rooms of young women changing in there and be like, "Virgin? Are you a virgin?" Yeah, they call virgins virgins in that movie. So that's what Louise Fletcher was doing prior to Brainstorm. But her performance here is very, very impressive, and she gives the best performance in the movie. I mean, hands down. I mean, it's kind of sad that, of course, a lot of the some of the attention, of course, when this movie came out was, of course, all on Natalie Wood. But the thing is, Natalie Wood, and I'm not the only person to say this, by the way, she has a very thankless performance in this movie. She's very thankless in this role. It's a very, there's nothing about Natalie Wood in this movie that jumps out at you. Although the truth of the matter is that it's a little surreal in that in the 2 years that was spent between when shooting stopped in November of 1981 when Wood died, to September of 83 when the movie was eventually released and at the Ziegfeld Theater in New York City, as Code 2-1 just said that he attended. But the thing is that there are reshoots with Natalie's younger sister Lana, and in the scenes where you specifically see the back of her head, that's a key to let you know that is probably her sister Lana Wood. It's not in all the shots. I don't think that they're in all the shots. And to give credit to the editors, it's pretty seamless. I mean, to give full credit to the editors, it is actually pretty seamless that that it's difficult for us to tell if that really is Natalie or Lana, but I do think they pull it off. Yep. Mm-hmm. But we'll point those out, those certain scenes when we come to it. But at any rate, so Christopher Walken, he had just won the Oscar for The Deer Hunter, and Louise Fletcher had won the Oscar for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and also co-star Cliff Robertson had won the 1968 Oscar for Best Actor for Charlie, although there's a bit of a controversy surrounding that Oscar win that I'm not going to go into. If I ever do a commentary on that movie, I'll go into that controversy, but not now. So yeah, they just invented this virtual reality device that can basically record any human emotions, human experiences in, as if you were feeling them yourselves, as if you were reliving the situations that they were going through at the time. That's the whole idea behind Brainstorm here. Yeah, I agree about Natalie Wood in the film. It was not a strong character. Don't really remember her much in the movie. Yeah. And a lot of here again. Brainstorm is a movie that was basically swept under the rug after it finally came out in September of 1983. It wasn't really mentioned. I mean, I honestly don't remember it being shown on television that much. Considering the fact that the only thing it does to get the PG rating is a bit of nudity. Yes, I'm with you. I'm totally with you there, Dave. I love the clunkiness of the technology. Yeah. See, that's another reason why I think Brainstorm is fascinating on so many different levels. It's fascinating in terms of what Douglas Trumbull was trying to accomplish with his show scan process. It's fascinating because of the imagery that result from that process and the use of the different aspect ratios for those particular sequences and everything. But it's also fascinating on the darker side of the fact that Natalie Wood, during a production break of this movie, died under mysterious circumstances on the yacht that she and Robert Wagner had at the time when they were in a relationship. However, and maybe this is part of the reason why this movie has just been kind of abandoned, because maybe it's just me. Does MGM not want us to believe that Christopher Walken and Natalie Wood had a relationship during the making of this movie? Look, it's according to the screenwriter. According to one of the screenwriters on Brainstorm, he said that he actually caught Christopher Walken and Natalie Wood fucking like rabbits in the dressing rooms. Well, and you got to understand that, during the making of this movie, while they were very, very close, there's not really any I've never read anything in my in my research of Brainstorm that they were actually definitively having an affair during the production. Now, Douglas Trumbull does stipulate that during the scenes where they are, there is a bedroom scene where they're covered by a sheet, and it suggests that they're naked under that sheet. But according to him, during the scenes where they were intimate together on screen, that it didn't look like that they were going so far as to show being intimate. And that might have been due to the fact that they were trying to keep it under wraps and they didn't want anybody to get the idea they were having a relationship behind the scenes. I mean, that would obviously explain Robert Wagner's jealousy. Because from what we know of the story, before her death on that ship, is that she was constantly laughing and joking with Christopher Walken. They were almost inseparable. not only during the making of the movie, but also when they were on the boat with Robert Wagner. But the case surrounding Natalie Wood's death was just reopened literally only a year or so ago. Literally in the past year that the case has been reopened, there's been a lot more questions and speculation and conjecture. And look, I am almost convinced that Robert Wagner, due to a toxic combination of jealousy and anger and rage, and alcohol, just went a little too off the rails and was ultimately responsible for her death. We're never going to be able to prove it, and Robert Wagner is going to be dead probably long before it ever comes out if he does have anything to do with it. But Lana Wood, who, of course, as I said, is in reshoots in this movie, she actually wrote a book recently. And in that book, in her heart, she knows for a fact that Robert Wagner was responsible. And Christopher Walken, for his part, has been very, very hush about the relationship and ultimately about the movie for the past 35 years. Lana Wood wrote that Natalie was unaware at the early production stage that Fletcher had the better role. She says Natalie felt it was her baby Jane period. Older actresses playing in screamers. Yes, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense when it comes to both her performance in Brainstorm and Louise Fletcher's. Because that's the thing. I mean, from what I understand, in 1983, they weren't even really promoting Brainstorm as Natalie Wood's last movie because it got practically no promotion at the time. And like John said, that poster they really dropped the ball on promoting this movie. Which here again, it's upsetting because of the fact that this was always meant to be seen on theatrical screens using this show scan process that Douglas Trumbull had developed. And I agree with you, Dave. I mean, we'll never get the whole story when it comes to the death regarding Natalie Wood. I mean, it's been over 40 years. I mean, we'll never get the whole story. And, unless Christopher Walken drops a bomb after Robert Wagner's death, which is always a possibility, I don't see us ever finding out what really happened. Okay, now here's a perfect example of a scene I was talking about earlier. See, Natalie enters this shot with just her head. We saw her in that earlier shot of her helping the kids, but here's a shot where we only see the back of her head. But when she turns, yes, that is Natalie Wood. But in later scenes, because from what I understand, she shot about 80 to 90% of the movie. She shot all the major sequences that her character was in. And then there was only just like pickups and reshoots. And that's where her sister Lana Wood came in to double for her. I agree with you. They should have included Fletcher on the posters. Hell, oh my God. Like I said, they had 2 Oscar winners headlining this movie. MGM could have done so much. And here again, they refused. When this movie was in that production break and Natalie Wood died, MGM refused to provide one more penny to finish the movie. They wanted to kill it. They wanted to kill the movie, collect the insurance money. That's what they wanted to do. Which, God. I mean, yes, it's a tragedy. It's a very, very sad tragedy. And here again, we're never going to know the story about what happened. But regardless, even beyond that, why they didn't allow Trumbull to finish his movie is beyond me, because they could have done a hell of a lot more promotion for it, even without looking like they were trying to benefit or profit off of her tragic death. I mean, like I said, they waited 2 years They got everything, they got it as good as they could ever get it with the footage that they shot and with what they were able to do afterward. And I think what the result is a fascinating, but yes, very flawed movie. And when I first saw this, and granted, I saw Brain Scan about 20 years ago, or Brainstorm about 20 years ago, excuse me. I saw it when I was in high school. And I dug at the ideas that the movie was playing with, even if even if not every actor was spectacular, or the music is kind of weirdly used in this movie. I mean, um, James Horner is, of course, one of my favorite composers, and he actually won a Saturn Award for his work on Brainstorm, as did Louise Fletcher for her performance. Both very well deserved. It's amazing to me that the visual effects did not get any real attention. It's amazing to me that the the Academy didn't consider any of the technical aspects with regard to this movie. But here again, this was meant to have a much grander theatrical release than most other movies were, particularly at the time. Excuse me. Mm. Ah. In 1981, Douglas Trumbull directed the special effects for the Ridley Scott film Blade Runner. By this time, Trumbull had sworn off doing special effects for other directors, but was lured to the project by the opportunity to work with Ridley Scott and a chance to create something other than sterile gray and white spacecraft. Quote, one of the things that appealed to me about the project, Trumbull recalled in an interview to Cinefx magazine, was that it was not a space movie. I'm just real tired of doing spaceships against star backgrounds. Indeed, the iconic images of a polluted dystopian Los Angeles looking more like an oil refinery than a metropolis, and complete with building-sized electronic billboards and bulbous blimps circling overhead advertising off-world job opportunities, became the film's visual trademarks. Despite the experience and professionalism of excuse me, Trumbull's disciples, not everything went smoothly. According to Cinefx magazine, a young model maker was giving his girlfriend a tour of the effects shop, and he noticed that a large model of a building being photographed in the smoke room, a sealed room specially constructed to provide a smoky atmosphere, was burning fiercely. Thinking this was just another effect, he mentioned it in passing to a supervisor, who immediately grabbed an extinguisher and ran to pull out the fire. The plastic and fiberglass model had been mounted too close to a powerful light, which eventually set it ablaze. Trumbull did not complete Blade Runner. David Dreyer took over as special effects supervisor, leaving the film as agreed about halfway through to concentrate on pre-production for his next directing effort, Brainstorm, a story of two brilliant scientists who develop a revolutionary device to record and vicariously experience other people's feelings and perceptions, a device the military tries to steal for its own purposes. Brainstorm was to be a showcase for Trumbull's show scan process, which used special cameras and projectors to capture and project 70 millimeter film at 60 frames per second. At the last minute, the show scan process was not used because theater owners balked at the idea of installing expensive new projection equipment. Completely understandable. The film was shot conventionally at 24 frames per second on 35 millimeter film, though Trumbull continued his process of shooting effects work in 70 millimeter. In movies, people often do flashbacks and point of view shots as gauzy, mysterious, distant kind of image. Trumbull recalled, and I wanted to do just the opposite, which was to make the material of the mind even more real and high impact than quote unquote reality. And yes, the special effects are the star of the film and kind of overtakes the story at times. Absolutely agree. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is that the story, Leonard Maltin was one of the few critics to actually give Brainstorm a positive review upon its release in 1983. He gave it 3 stars out of 4, and in contrast, Roger Ebert only gave it 2 stars out of 4. But even Leonard Maltin stipulated in his review that, look, story is not this movie's strong suit. I mean, we're talking about a movie helmed by a guy that is used to effects and models and animation and everything. And here again, as mentioned during the Silent Running commentary, doesn't have a lot of experience with actors. In fact, it was really with Silent Running that he garnered that experience with actors, which he utilized for Brainstorm. And see, yeah, these are all the 70 millimeter shots in Super Panavision 70, which were, meant to, in terms of the theatrical release, take viewers on this virtual reality ride, so to speak, at interims throughout the movie. I mean, even though there's only about 20 minutes of footage that was shot in this process, it's still dazzling. I mean, even on the television screen, I do think it's dazzling work. You at least get an idea of what you're supposed to experience when you see this in the theater. But the truth of the matter is that this was supposed to showcase Trumbull's show scan process, which he had patented. Trumbull first came to, okay, Trumbull developed the show scan process in the late 70s and early 80s when he became interested in increasing the fidelity or definition of movies. Similar to the quality issues addressed later by high definition television, the visual fidelity of movies was limited by the medium. When projected onto a large screen, the grain of 35 millimeter film stock is often quite visible, reducing the quality of the displayed image. The problem is further exacerbated by the larger grain in fast film stock, often used to capture high-speed action. Trumbull chose 70 millimeter film for his new process to provide higher resolution. He also did research into frame rate, running a series of tests with 35 millimeter stock filmed and projected at various speeds, shown to audiences who were instrumented to biometrically test their responses. He found that as the frame rate increased, so did the viewer's emotional reaction. Trumbull theorized that although viewers see smooth motion from film displayed at 24 frames per second, the standard for decades, they are subconsciously aware of the flicker, which reduces the film's emotional impact, and increasing the projection speed decreases the flicker. In 1993, Trumbull, Jeffrey Williamson, Robert Augusti, and Edmund DeGiulio received a Scientific and Engineering Academy Award for the ShowScan camera system. ShowScan Film Corporation, which produced and marketed the equipment, underwent Chapter 7 bankruptcy in 2002. The process was then acquired by a new company called ShowScan Entertainment. And, Douglas Trumbull, he only produced a few short films to demonstrate the process. And the 1983 feature film Brainstorm was intended to be the first ShowScan feature, with the normal scenes in 35 millimeter and the virtual reality scenes in ShowScan. But unfortunately, this plan, of course, proved too cumbersome. Instead, the virtual reality scenes ended up being shot in 70 millimeter, but at the standard 24 frames per second. Since then, ShowScan has been used mostly for short ride films in conjunction with powered motion simulator seats. And the Academy of Film Archive houses the ShowScan collection, consisting of negatives and soundtrack elements for numerous short films created by World's Fair expositions, special venue attractions, and motion-based simulator rides. In fact, on the Douglas Trumbull, on the Blu-ray of Silent Running, there's a whole featurette where Douglas Trumbull talks about working on the Back to the Future simulation ride that used to be at Universal Studios. I mean, even though the one responsible for writing the script for that ride was actually Peyton Reed, who later directed the Ant-Man films and the first Bring It On film. it was actually Douglas Trumbull who actually worked on the Back to the Future ride, and I think Back to the Future fans will be glad to hear that. But just to let everybody know, I will be doing an audio commentary for Blade Runner later this summer in July. I'm going to have to do a hell of a lot of research for that. I mean, read the Philip K. Dick story that the movie is based on, and of course, you have all these different cuts. I'm not going to bother sifting through all the different cuts, but Blade Runner, I think it's about time I did an audio commentary for Blade Runner. So I'm going to do that later in the year in July, probably for its 40th anniversary. I think that would be perfect. And tomorrow I plan on seeing Star Trek The Motion Picture, which of course Douglas Trumbull worked on the big screen. They just put out Paramount. They just put out the 2022 edition of the director's version of Star Trek The Motion Picture. In 1979, it was deemed unfinished, and now it's considered finally finished. According to everything that Trumbull and director Robert Wise wanted to accomplish with the movie. Remember, they both worked on Andromeda Strain together. But when Douglas Trumbull passed away in February of this year, yes, he did pass away in February of 2022. He is given credit on the 2022 edition of Star Trek The Motion Picture, and that is officially his last credit, spending a long career of accomplishments, his final credit to film. So I'll be seeing Star Trek The Motion Picture on the big screen in that 2022 Director's Edition tomorrow in the afternoon, and I'm looking forward to it. Star Trek The Motion Picture, that should be interesting. Yes. Speaking of somebody who is not a hardcore Star Trek fan, I actually do think it's a near masterpiece. I'm actually convinced it's a near masterpiece, and it's not just because of Douglas Trumbull's effects. It's because of the fact that it dares to take this 2001 route instead of a Star Wars route. It was released right after Star Wars, and of course, there's no weapons, no laser blasts in that movie. It strictly adheres to science and everything. Basing it on the Voyager series that were launched in 1979, which also later created the basis for Starman, the John Carpenter movie, which came out 4 years later, which I'm actually a huge fan of. I mean, more so than most other John Carpenter fans. I'm actually a massive Starman fan. But all right, now it should be mentioned, we're going to talk about Cliff Robertson later. I'm going to have some stuff to say on Cliff Robertson, but the government scientist on the couch there in the white suit and the glasses. Now, I meant to double check what his name was before the commentary, and I didn't get a chance to do so. But that guy is responsible for one of the scariest scenes in the history of motion pictures, and I will explain. 2 years before this was shot in 1981, in 1979, we had a film called The China Syndrome, which was based on nuclear accidents that were occurring at these plants and the potential damage that they could do to the environment and to the country as a whole. And Michael Douglas, who served as producer from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and cast Jack Lemmon and Jane Fonda, and Wilford Brimley in his very first movie, by the way, in this film about a nuclear power plant that nearly has this devastating accident. It's all recorded on film. Michael Douglas wants to showcase the film on the news networks, and of course they decline because they're already getting pressure from the nuclear power plants not to put this out and everything, because they're building 2 more plants, and of course they don't want anything interfering with those plans. So they bring the film to these 2 scientists at a university, And the guy in the glasses in Brainstorm is actually one of the scientists in that movie. And I'm quoting him, is that it looks like, I mean, he actually says the title of the movie, The China Syndrome. And when he turns to Michael Douglas and Jane Fonda, he tells them, we might have come very close to the China Syndrome, and that is if the core is exposed for whatever reason, it will melt down into the Earth's environment, theoretically, to China. And he actually said it would render an area the size of Pennsylvania permanently uninhabitable. Well, 10 days after the China Syndrome came out, we had the 3 Mile Island accident, which actually did happen in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And reportedly, when the China Syndrome played in theaters in Pennsylvania, that reportedly that people screamed, that there were people that screamed and ran out of the theater. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case, because that is one of the scariest movies I've ever seen, and that is certainly one of the scariest moments in film ever, just because of that foreshadowing, because of that prescience that was all over the China Syndrome. But yeah, the head of the government scientists who are taking over this Brainstorm project, he's the same guy from the China Syndrome that actually mentioned the title for the first time and explained what the title is. And it's very, very, very chilling. I absolutely agree, Dave. Yes. Great film, The China Syndrome. Yep. Now, let's do a timestamp here real quick. In Brainstorm, we are currently 34 minutes and 30 seconds in the movie. So 34 minutes and 30 seconds we are in Brainstorm. And we're not gonna be with Louise Fletcher for much longer. So we should go ahead and talk about Ms. Fletcher here. Louise Fletcher, she's still with us. She's 87 years old. She was born in 1934. And she began appearing in several television series, including Lawman and Maverick in the late 1950s. And I was, quote, I was 5 feet 10 inches tall, and no television producer thought a tall woman could be sexually attractive to anybody. I was able to get jobs on Westerns because the actors were even taller than I was, unquote. In 1960, Fletcher made 2 guest appearances on Perry Mason, and in the summer of 1960, she was cast as Roberta McConnell in the episode The Bounty Hunter of the show Tate, starring David McLean. In 1974, she returned to film in Thieves Like Us, co-produced by her husband and Robert Altman, who also directed the movie. And when the two had a falling out on Altman's next project, Nashville, Altman decided to cast Lily Tomlin for the role of Linnea Reese, initially created for and by Louise Fletcher. She was supposed to play the Lily Tomlin role in Nashville. Meanwhile, director Milos Forman saw Fletcher in Thieves and cast her as McMurphy's nemesis, Nurse Ratched, in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Fletcher gained international recognition and fame for the role, winning the Academy Award for Best Actress, as well as the BAFTA Award and the Golden Globe. She was only the 3rd actress ever to win an Academy Award, BAFTA Award, and Golden Globe for a single performance after Audrey Hepburn and Liza Minnelli. When Fletcher accepted her Oscar, she used sign language to thank her parents. After Cuckoo's Nest, Fletcher had mixed success in film. She made several financially and critically successful films, while others were box office failures, most notably the very controversial Exorcist II, The Heretic, which I actually don't think is bad as a lot of people make it out to be. But then again, I'm not really a fan of the Exorcist franchise as a whole. But she was also in The Cheap Detective in 1978, The Lady in Red, The Magician of Lublin. She was in the original Firestarter, which just got a remake just very, very recently. She was also in Invaders from Mars, Two Moon Junction, Best of the Best, Blue Steel, another virtual reality thriller called Virtuosity. If you remember that from 1995 with Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe. And she was also in High School High and Cruel Intentions. Additionally, she played the character of Ruth Shorter, a supporting role in Aurora Borealis, 2005, alongside Joshua Jackson and Donald Sutherland, and appeared in the Fox Faith film The Last Sin Eater in 2007. Fletcher co-starred in TV movies such as The Karen Carpenter Story, Nightmare on the 13th Floor, The Haunting of Seacliff Inn, and The Stepford Husbands. From 1993 to 1999, she held a recurring role in Star Trek Deep Space Nine as the scheming Bajoran religious leader Kai Wynn Adami. She also earned Emmy Award nominations to her guest roles on Picket Fences, later on Joan of Arcadia, and in 2009, Fletcher appeared in Heroes as the physician mother of character Emma Coolidge. In 2011, she appeared in Shameless as Grammy Gallagher, and Frank Gallagher's foul-mouthed and hard-living mother who is serving a prison sentence for manslaughter related to a meth lab explosion. She portrayed the recurring role of Rosie on the series Girl Boss. And she made her first film in 1963, and then, of course, in Thieves Like Us, 1974. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, though, changed everything for Louise Fletcher. But at any rate, she's still with us. I mean, she's 87 years old now. She'll turn 88 in July. So it's amazing. A lot of the principal actors in this movie are still with us, aside from Natalie Wood. Although Cliff Robertson, he passed away a few years ago. Cliff Robertson is mainly known to most people nowadays as Uncle Ben in the Spider-Man trilogy featuring Tobey Maguire. But, oh, man, did he have a long career way before that. I mean, as I mentioned before, he won the Oscar for Charlie in 1968. Still a lot of controversy about that. I'm not going to get into it now. But what I know him primarily from, Cliff Robertson, is actually when he played Shane on the Batman television series, which was a takeoff on I'm sorry, he played the character of Shame, Shame, which was a takeoff on Shane, the 1953 movie, the famous Western. And he was also in an episode called The Great Train Robbery, which is a nice little nod to the 1903 silent epic film, The Great Train Robbery. Mm-hmm. But Cliff Robertson, he had done films in the 70s like Obsession for Brian De Palma and, lots of character roles. And in 1983, he actually starred in another film that I'll be doing a commentary later on this year for called Star 80. He plays Hugh Hefner in that. And that was the final film directed by Bob Fosse, which came out only a few months after Brainstorm here. Now, Natalie Wood, as most people knew her at that time, she was, of course, in Rebel Without a Cause, the James Dean movie, which made her a star. And then what made her an international star was, in fact, when she played Maria in West Side Story, the 1961 musical adaptation of the famous play about gang warfare in New York City between Puerto Ricans and between the Sharks and the Jets versus the Sharks. Yes, I mean, West Side Story is one of my favorite musicals, and I should be able to talk about it just like that. But that's where Natalie Wood was primarily known for. But the thing about West Side Story is that she was also dubbed by Marni Nixon. Although it is true that they did record the movie with her original voice singing the songs, and but then they dubbed her later with Marni Nixon, as unfortunately a lot of stars at the time were dubbed over. Like they did that for Deborah Kerr in An Affair to Remember, and other films of the period. I mean, chances are, if you hear a woman singing in films in the early '50s, late '50s, early '60s, it's probably Marni Nixon. Uh, but at this time, and of course, Natalie Wood was also famous for playing the child in Miracle on 34th Street. So she was obviously, everybody had known her since she was acting on screen as a child, but she was also in The Searchers, Marjorie Morningstar, Splendor in the Grass. She did that with right before West Side Story, and Gypsy, Sex and the Single Girl, where she played the author, Helen Gurley Brown. Inside Daisy Clover, The Great Race, This Property is Condemned, Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice. She will be appearing as herself in a movie called The Candidate, which I will be doing later on this year. Another movie I'll be doing a 50th anniversary commentary for. But in the late 70s, Natalie Wood wasn't really doing well in terms of the screen, because she had appeared in the sci-fi movie Meteor, starring Sean Connery, which is a pretty awful movie. It might be even worse than Beyond the Poseidon Adventure, which came out the same year. And then she only did 2 movies between Meteor and Brainstorm. They were The Last Married Couple in America, which was a comedy directed by Gilbert Cates, starring George Segal and Richard Benjamin and Valerie Harper. Didn't do well at the box office, only made $13 million. And the only other movie she made at that time was a film directed, produced, and written by Paul Mazursky called Willie and Phil, which I need to see that sometime. I mean, that's been one that I've known about for years. But she does have a bit part in that, although here again, that movie was a flop. So at this point in her career, she wasn't doing well. And I don't know if after she read the script for Brainstorm, if she figured that this would be a great way to put her back into the spotlight. Because in all honesty, lovely actress, and she had some good performances early in her career. Brainstorm is not one of them. I think she's at her best in these flashback sequences where we see her being with Christopher Walken and happy and everything. And that's almost a little chilling on its own, because here again, it goes back to the stories about, well, were Christopher Walken and Natalie Wood, were they having an affair during the making of this movie? I mean, in terms of the movie itself and the story, it almost doesn't matter. Because they're supposed to be estranged. There's supposed to be a couple that are estranged, and they come back together because of this project. This project does, build their relationship again. And so, look, the way this movie moves, it's supposed to be that, by the end that they're going to be intimately involved once again. With the tragedy being that his partner, Louise Fletcher, dies due to this new technology. Bob Fosse bragged that he broke the blacklist by hiring Cliff for Star 80, forgetting completely Cliff's role here in Brainstorm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, and also to add to that, of course, it's true that Hugh Hefner actually sued the Star 80 production because of the fact that they cast Cliff Robertson as himself. Yeah, apparently he wasn't very happy with how Robertson portrayed him on screen. And a few years before, Cliff Robertson blew the whistle on film executive David Begelman, who was trying to involve Cliff in an embezzlement scheme. Instead of rallying around him, the industry shunned him. Yeah, that is very true too. I think that happened around Obsession in the mid 70s, I think. That was a big deal. Here again, this is completely separate from the from the Charlie controversy. What was that? Yes, in 1977, Cliff Robertson discovered that his signature had been forged on a $10,000 check payable to him, although it was for work he had not performed. He also learned that the forgery had been carried out by then Columbia Pictures head David Begelman, and on reporting it, he had inadvertently triggered one of the biggest Hollywood scandals of the 1970s. Begelman was charged with embezzlement, convicted, and later fired from Columbia. Despite pressure to remain quiet, Robertson and his wife Dina Merrill spoke to the press. As a result, Hollywood producers blacklisted him. And he finally returned to studio film 5 years later, starring in Brainstorm. The story of the scandal is told in David McClintock's 1982 bestseller, Indecent Exposure. Correct, 1977. Yep. Yeah, so Brainstorm was really Cliff Robertson's comeback role. So, I mean, Louise Fletcher gave the performance to the movie, but this was meant to be Cliff Robertson's comeback after this scandal. And of course, this ended up being Natalie Wood's last movie. So this movie has a lot of baggage. It has a lot of baggage. I mean, it was, yeah. Now, see, I mean, while Douglas Trumbull was directing uh, Christopher Walken and Natalie Wood in these scenes, he didn't detect kind of any kind of romantic or sexual um, thing between the two of them. But here again, I mean, being actors, I wouldn't be surprised if they all they did was giving performances for the camera and ultimately for Douglas Trumbull. I mean, who's to? I wouldn't be surprised one iota if they had an affair that it was just kept under wraps. But yeah, apparently, according to one of the screenwriters, he is absolutely certain that he caught them in dressing rooms doing the dirty. So it makes me think of this is a kind of an unrelated story, but I just have to share this real quick, and it kind of goes along with the scene that we're watching right now, where of course one of the guys wants to use this virtual reality device to pretend he's fucking a particular woman right here. This is the scene that got the movie the PG rating, by the way. It's this little amount of nudity right here. But I was going to say, in a movie in the 1930s, I forget the name of the movie offhand, but it was one of the movies that Vivien Leigh and Laurence Olivier worked on when they were first starting doing films in the mid 30s. And apparently, Vivien Leigh was a nymphomaniac. So as a result, like, she would demand sex constantly when they weren't shooting. And so, I mean, she and Laurence and Olivier were in the dressing rooms, fucking up a storm. And then when Laurence Olivier was called to the stage and asked to perform action scenes, he couldn't do it. He was so exhausted from having sex with Vivien Leigh in the dressing rooms that he just could not do action scenes. And yet somehow he's still considered the greatest actor who ever lived. But yeah, Cliff, I've always liked Cliff Robertson. I mean, Brian De Palma doesn't have very flattering words about working with him on Obsession, and of course, okay, I know I keep mentioning that Charlie controversy. I think I might as well just explain that controversy right now, because since I brought it up like 3 or 4 times, and people are probably wondering, like, what controversy? Okay, Cliff Robertson won the Academy Award for Best Actor, but under some scrutiny or some controversy, because less than 2 weeks after the ceremony, Time magazine mentioned that the Academy's generalized concerns over, quote, excessive and vulgar solicitation of votes, and said that, quote, many members agreed that Robertson Award was based more on promotion than on performance. As time went on, many saw Robertson's performance to be weaker compared to the other nominees, such as Peter O'Toole in The Lion and Winter. So that's the controversy surrounding Cliff Robertson winning the Oscar for Charlie. Is that the award came about more due to promotion than the actual performance. But I'll probably never see Charlie again. But look, I mean, I still like Cliff Robertson in a lot of the movies that he did, particularly this and Star 80, believe it or not. Brainstorm and Star 80, I think, features some good work from Robertson. Just 1 second here. That's interesting. Never heard that story. Yeah, apparently that controversy has always been attached to Cliff Robertson winning that Oscar for Charlie back in 1968. But it should be noted, of course, real quick, that the original story for Brainstorm was thought of by Bruce Joel Rubin. And if that name means anything, it's the fact that he won the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay for Ghost, which was the 1990 mega hit with Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore and Whoopi Goldberg. And he also wrote Jacob's Ladder, which is probably the better film from 1990 about Tim Robbins and his experiences during the Vietnam War with PTSD and everything. Great movie. And it's definitely Adrian Lyne's best film by far. However, Bruce Joel Rubin, he also wrote the movie Deadly Friend for director Wes Craven. He also served as an uncredited screenwriter on Sleeping with the Enemy, a Goldie Hawn movie called Deceived, a Michael Keaton movie called My Life, and he also wrote Deep Impact and Stuart Little 2, and then ultimately he also did Ghost the Musical, which was in 2012. But the last movie that he wrote, which he adapted for the screen, was a movie called The Time Traveler's Wife, with Rachel McAdams and Eric Bana. And it basically follows a Chicago librarian with a paranormal genetic disorder that causes him to randomly time travel as he tries to build a romantic relationship with Rachel McAdams, who would become his wife. Rachel McAdams has been doing a lot of roles like that. I mean, she was like that in About Time, and then with The Time Traveler's Wife, that was the last film that Bruce Joel Rubin adapted from a novel by Audrey Niffenegger. Yes. But I remember when I watched The Time Traveler's Wife, and I remember that he kept on everywhere that Eric Bana transported, he would be completely naked. And I was thinking, okay, did the author of the book, did she just basically watch The Terminator and get that idea? I don't know. Now, here is the turning point of Brainstorm right here, which is Louise Fletcher's death, which comes approximately an hour in. It comes approximately an hour into the plot. Suffering from heart problems and a constant cigarette smoker, Lillian suffers a heart attack while working alone, and realizing that she is about to die, she is going to record her experiences, which of course will be viewed later. Yeah, I mean, you watch these movies from the 1980s like Brainstorm, and Midnight Run is another movie I need to mention in terms of just the cigarette smoking. Like these people just like they light up anywhere they want to. And I think that was a deliberate character choice to make her like just light up these cigarettes in like every single scene to let you know, oh, she's not going to be with us very much longer. But of course, back then, you could smoke on airplanes, for God's sake. I mean, it's really amazing how much times have changed since then. Really amazing. But just to let everybody know, we are approximately 57 minutes into Brainstorm, and we have approximately 49 minutes of screen time left. This is a hell of a death scene. I mean, this is obviously, I mean, Fletcher, you want to say her performance is over the top, fine. I say she deserved the the award, the Saturn Award that she won for Best Supporting Actress for this movie. I think she earned it. I think she definitely earned it. Yeah, it's just a shame that she didn't really get to do much after this, because you got to remember that Brainstorm was practically just dismissed and, swept under the carpet by MGM, because here again, they did not want to pay any money whatsoever so that the film could be finished. To prepare for production on Brainstorm, Trumbull took most of the key cast and crew up to the Esalen Institute, an experimental research facility in Northern California known for its New Age classes and workshops. In September of 1981, the cast and crew traveled to North Carolina to begin 6 weeks of shooting at locations including the Elion Hitchings Building in Research Triangle Park and Duke University, before moving back to the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Studios in Culver City, California in November to film interior scenes. And of course, after Natalie Wood unfortunately died, Trumbull always believed that the financially strapped MGM simply got cold feet about putting up the rest of the money to complete Brainstorm. Quote, MGM's problem was that insurance institution Lloyd's of London, when it took depositions from me and other people, realized that the film could be finished. Why should they pay an insurance claim for something that really wasn't damaged goods? Perfectly valid question. When MGM refused to pay for the film to be completed, Lloyd's of London provided $2.75 million for Trumbull to complete principal photography and an additional $3.5 million towards post-production. Meanwhile, other studios showed interest in buying Brainstorm from MGM to release as their own production. MGM decided to allow Lloyd's of London to offer to other people in this town, to offer the film to many other studios in town, Several of them made bids to MGM. And the studio suddenly realized that a lot of other people in this town were excited about Brainstorm and were ready to put up millions of dollars. MGM figured they'd look like jerks if they let it go, and it turned out to be a big success. So they finally decided to work out this deal where Lloyd's of London would put up the remaining money, and it became a profit participant. Trumbull proceeded to complete the film by rewriting the script and using Natalie Wood's younger sister Lana, as mentioned before, to film the remaining few scenes. And yes, indeed, at the very, very end of Brainstorm, after the credits have all gone off the screen, there is a dedication that says to Natalie. Here again, I just think is a little ironic because her performance is just not, I don't know. It just seems like with this performance, there wasn't any energy to her when she was filming these scenes, aside from those flashbacks. It's really weird. When she's with Christopher Walken, she seems perfectly happy in that she's totally into the shooting. When she's not with Christopher Walken, she's dull as dishwater. And I'm sorry, I got to be honest here. which here again, I mean, it does fuel speculation that in fact they were having an affair at this time. But here again, it's mostly speculation at this point. Yeah, I agree. I agree, Dave. I mean, absolutely. Louise Fletcher was indeed this. I'm assuming you're referring to Louise Fletcher, who was the standout of the film, because it wasn't Natalie Wood. I mean, despite the fact this was Natalie Wood's final film, I mean, it was Louise Fletcher that really exploded in her role. Yeah, absolutely. Brainstorm was finally released on September 30th, 1983, almost 2 years after Wood's death. It opened on a small number of screens and with little publicity, despite being lauded unofficially as Natalie Wood's last movie. Janet Maslin of the New York Times gave particular credit to Louise Fletcher's quote unquote superb performance. Christopher John reviewed Brainstorm in Aries magazine, special edition number 2, and commented that, quote, for those looking for nothing more than the same old spaceships and monsters, well, this one probably isn't for you. But then again, you've got all the movies you need this year. Brainstorm is for the rest of us. Now, but Roger Ebert, of course, gave the film only 2 stars out of 4 and described the premise as a good idea for a movie and credited Trumbull with providing intriguing special effects. However, Ebert thought the cast was not used well. The characters take such a secondary importance to the gadget that we never feel much for them. Yeah. The film was not a commercial success with a production budget of $18 million, grossing only $10 million in ticket sales in North America. Because of the immensely troubled production and disagreements with MGM, Trumbull opted never to direct a Hollywood film ever again. In 1983, he stated, quote, I have no interest in doing another Hollywood feature film, absolutely none. The movie business is so totally screwed up that I just don't have the energy to invest 3 or 4 years in a feature film. Movie making is like waging war. It destroys your personal life too. The people who can survive the process of making films have largely given up their personal lives in order to do that, just because it's such a battle to make a movie. And in doing that, they've isolated themselves from the very audience that they're trying to reach. And in 2013, 9 years ago, he did explain that the uncertain circumstances of Natalie Wood's death were the main reason for this decision, but he would later return to movie making because he later made a short about UFOs. And it is true that at the 11th Saturn Awards, Brainstorm won Best Actress for Louise Fletcher and Best Music for James Horner. It also received nominations for Best Science Fiction Film, Best Director, Best Special Effects, and a posthumous Best Supporting Actress nomination for Natalie Wood, believe it or not. Now, let's talk about the James Horner score, because James Horner scored Brainstorm in 1981, and I don't know whether he scored the film before or after Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, although if I was going to put money down, I would say it was before that time. Because I have a feeling that the producers on Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, listened to James Horner's score for Brainstorm and liked it well enough to hire him to not only score Star Trek II, but also Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. But, I mean, you know, nobody really knew who James Horner was at that point when right before he was when he was made to be the the score for Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Because if you remember, in 1983, when Brainstorm came out, the only other score that he had been associated with was for the movie Kroll, the fantasy adventure that was made for like $40 million. The movie isn't great, but his music is great in it. And of course, you know, he would later go on to be nominated for Aliens and Field of Dreams, Apollo 13, Braveheart, Titanic, A Beautiful Mind, House of Sand and Fog, and of course Avatar. And of course he died way too young. He died in a plane crash. Actually, when he was 61. Yeah, he died in 2015 when his turboprop aircraft, a short Tucano with registration number, crashed into the Los Padres National Forest near Ventacopa, California. Yep, he was the only occupant of the aircraft when it took off after fueling at Camarillo Airport. Yeah, and one of our great film composers. And I even like his score for Titanic. I don't like the song in Titanic, but I do like the score in it. So, Wrath of Khan score is excellent, as is all his works. And yeah, and see, the weird thing is, I like the Brainstorm score. I just don't think I don't know if it's used appropriately in the scenes that I I don't know. I think it could have been effective for other scenes, if that makes any sense, instead of the scenes that we actually hear the music in the movie. Because when I hear the music, I know it's James Horner, and I like it. I like the early James Horner sound. I just don't know if the scenes that the score plays in were appropriate. Like during the Louise Fletcher death scene, I think that could have benefited without the score. And I think that there were other scenes in this movie that could have benefited from the score. So it's really weird. I like the Brainstorm score. I just don't think it's used as well as it could have been. And I just think that it could have been used in places where it's not used, and it wasn't necessary in other places that it was used. That's just me. Now you got to understand though that of course this movie spent 2 years in post production, and so these decisions were being made during that time, and obviously there was a lot of confusion and a lot of sadness, surrounding the tragedy of Natalie Wood's death. That obviously this film, when it came out, it was very, very flawed, and it was not presented as the way that Douglas Trumbull always intended for it to be released as. It's a shame we'll never see Trumbull's original vision for Brainstorm. And I do agree with a lot of contemporary critics nowadays that this is the quintessential movie that could use a remake. I mean, we need somebody like a Duncan Jones or somebody that can take this sci-fi concept and give it a 21st century do-over. I think this is a prime example for a studio out there. MGM, of all people, that they've been remaking some of their movies left and right, like Valley Girl. Why can't they just remake Brainstorm? But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised from a studio perspective if there was just a lot of there's still a lot of pain and baggage from this production, that it's almost like they just don't want to be associated with it, period. Because here again, I mean, when this film got a limited release and only made 10 million at the box office, virtually disappeared for years. I mean, sure, we eventually got a Blu-ray, but it was bare bones, and it didn't come out until like 2007, 2008, very late in the Blu-ray cycle. No extras whatsoever. And I wouldn't be surprised if that Blu-ray didn't even respect what Douglas Trumbull was trying to do with the film, even after Natalie Wood died and everything that was gone into it, the way it was seen in 1983. It just wasn't the same seeing it on Blu-ray. Now, and weirdly enough, I also read that cut on the DVD and the Blu-ray is actually slightly longer. There is a shot of hell that Douglas Trumbull included in a heaven-hell scenario in the shot in this movie. Well, the shot of hell is taken out of the DVD and Blu-ray cut, from what I understand. And I've read that at multiple sites, so I do believe that it is very true. Did Warner Brothers have an issue with the shot of hell, or was it MGM? I don't know. See, that's the thing, is that MGM did not put out the Blu-ray. The Blu-ray was put out by Warner Brothers, who had acquired a lot of the Ted Turner library after 1986. So they were given the rights, and obviously they did not have access to original materials, to any deleted scenes, and they didn't bother going out to get a commentary for this, primarily because I wouldn't be surprised if somebody said, well, if we get a commentary for this movie, it's going to be impossible not to talk about Natalie Wood and her relationship with Christopher Walken. I mean, it's going to be impossible not to discuss that. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's one of those examples of a movie that, despite all its critical praise, and yes, it got its fair share of critical praise when it came out in '83, mixed, but at the same time, it was still there. And people do think that this is an important film in terms of Douglas Trumbull's achievements as a filmmaker. However, the problem is you have this Natalie Wood death hanging over it, and it just kind of, here again, I almost don't blame MGM for wanting to just not have anything to do with the movie, but refusing to just kill it and then just collect the insurance money. I mean, I'm just glad it had in the contract for the director that stated no, 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 this film will be done regardless of anything that might happen during production that might impact the production. And Natalie Wood's death was a prime example of that. In 1983, Christopher Walken also made another great movie, which I have on the Screen Factory Blu-ray, called The Dead Zone. I got it right here. Yeah, this is a great film directed by David Cronenberg, which Christopher Walken did evidently right after shooting Brainstorm, and it's really good. In fact, they almost make a decent double feature. They almost do. Although Dead Zone, that was based on the book by Stephen King. But at any rate, so let's do a timestamp here real quick. We are approximately 1 hour and 14 minutes in. Yeah. Actually, we're about 20 seconds away from that. But yeah, I mean, if you're going to jump in, we're at the 1 hour and 14-minute mark. And we have about 28 minutes left of Brainstorm here to go. Mm-hmm. The Dead Zone is brilliant. Walken is excellent and one of Cronenberg's best. Mm-hmm. I am in absolute agreement with you. Absolute agreement. It's probably my favorite David Cronenberg film right after The Fly. And I'm really looking forward to David Cronenberg's brand new new movie. What is it? Something from the Future, whatever. Oh, what is it? What is it called? Crimes of the Future. Yeah, Crimes of the Future. It just got shown at the Cannes Film Festival. Mm-hmm. I'm really looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, here we are getting into the final act of Brainstorm, where Christopher Walken is going to basically compromise the project remotely. Because like many other stories that are like this, that the project gets into the wrong hands, and now it's with government officials, going away from the original intention of what it was created for in the first place. And but here again, this is not a film where you should be scrutinizing the story. This is a movie where you go to see for the visuals as opposed to the actual story, because the story is familiar. There's no denying that. And here again, I think this is part of the reason why this film had a lukewarm reception at best. I mean, I just don't think, this is just me, I don't think this is an audience-friendly movie. I just don't think it is. I mean, Natalie Wood fans, I think, will be disappointed because it's not much of a performance, and her appearance in it is not necessarily minimal, but it's not exactly important as well. She's not a key part of this story in any way. So Natalie Wood fans, I can imagine being disappointed coming out of this. But if you're a sci-fi fan, and if you enjoy the work of Douglas Trumbull, this is a must-see. And I'm just glad that he was able to finish it. I mean, considering everything that happened, I'm just glad that he was able to finish the movie. I mean, Lloyd's of London came in at the last minute to said, yeah, we'll fund the rest of the movie and finish it. But I don't think this movie is as memorable as Silent Running. I mean, just in terms of the execution or the visuals or anything like that. Well, visuals, it is, but in terms of the story and in terms of the characters, I do think that Silent Running is a lot more memorable. A lot more memorable. I never saw Map of the Stars. Have to remedy that. Oh, well, I'll be perfectly honest with you. I think John, who was in the chat, he gave one of the most negative reviews I have ever seen anybody come from anybody on Map of the Stars. I don't remember loving it myself. But then again, David Cronenberg has always been hot and cold with me. Let's put it this way. I thought Videodrome was great, and yet I never want to see it again. Okay, I can't. I can't. I mean, that's about as high praise as I can give to a movie like that. I mean, I like Scanners. But there's some Cronenberg movies that I watched, like Existence. Which I just was kind of baffled. Like, yeah, see, John said, yeah. Oh, I hated it. Yes. I mean, I wasn't that impressed with Map of the Stars myself, and I don't remember necessarily hating it. But at any rate, So Christopher Walken, I mean, like I said before, this is one of his most normal characters that he's ever played on screen. He's known primarily for The Deer Hunter, of course, which he won the Oscar for. He actually started out acting in the late 1960s. He was actually in a version of The Three Musketeers in 1969, The Anderson Tapes, 1971. Woody Allen, of course, cast him in Annie Hall. Now, here's a connection right here I wasn't expecting. He was in a 1975 movie called Valley Forge, and it's a videotaped adaptation of the 1934 Broadway play by Maxwell Anderson, and it starred Richard Basehart and Harry Andrews and Simon Ward. And Valley Forge was, of course, the name of the ship that was shot in for the interiors in Silent Running. But Christopher Walken also made the 1977 movie The Sentinel. After The Deer Hunter, he was, of course, in Heaven's Gate, which was directed and written by Michael Cimino. That was the movie that, of course, famously bankrupted United Artists, who had by this time merged with MGM. And part of the reason why MGM didn't want to give any more money was because they were still in fallout after Heaven's Gate. Because United Artists, of course, was almost virtually bankrupt at that point. And so MGM was really, really having difficulty finding funding for a lot of their projects. I like how Christopher Walken loves his junk food in this movie. I mean, I think we saw before, like he ate like Chips Ahoy and all this. In a lot of these movies, like in Hollow Man with Kevin Bacon, I mean, these scientists, they always have poor diets. I mean, they're always eating, some kind of, candy or coffee or just, things that are constantly bad for you. And this is a pretty demented sequence right here. That's about as close to demented Christopher Walken as we get in this movie. But yeah, and like I said before, the same year as Brainstorm, he was also in The Dead Zone, which I just showed my Blu-ray for. And then 2 years after Brainstorm and Dead Zone, he would get the character of Max Zorin in A View to a Kill. And I'm just going to say real quick that I think A View to a Kill is one of the absolute worst James Bond movies. And Christopher Walken, as great as he is, he just can't save it. At least for me, he just can't save it. And I love him as an actor, I do. But I don't think he saved A View to a Kill from how terrible it was. But he was also in Biloxi Blues, At Close Range, Communion, King of New York. He was Max Schreck, and of course, Batman Returns. It's probably the first movie I had a taste of Christopher Walken, because I remember I saw Batman Returns right before I saw The Deer Hunter. And then, of course, he was in True Romance, Pulp Fiction, of course, The Addiction, The Prophecy, Last Man Standing. Mouse Hunt, and one of my favorites of his later years, which was Blast from the Past, where he played a husband to Sissy Spacek, and their son goes out and sees the world for the first time after they've stayed in a fallout shelter for 30 years. It's a pretty fun movie. And he was also in Man on Fire, the remake of Stepford Wives, the Adam Sandler movie Click. And he's still working. I mean, he's going to be in Dune Part 2. Yeah, Christopher Walken is going to be in Dune Part 2 as Shaddam the Fourth. So he's still working. He's still plugging away. I mean, he's 79 now. And I wouldn't say this is a great Christopher Walken performance, but he does solid work in it. He's pretty solid in this role as the scientist. I would say. I just don't think it's one of his best performances, and I also don't think it stands out in any way. I mean, here again, it seems like Walken and Wood are at their best when they're together on screen. Here again, let the speculation overflow. But, it seems like their best moments are always when they're together and not when they're not together. Now, but Christopher Walken, this scene is pretty good right here where Oh, it is one of the weak Bond films. Yeah, definitely. And here again, I know there are people that love Christopher Walken in A View to a Kill. And I love his craziness. I love his zaniness, but I just don't think it's enough to save the movie as a whole. I mean, as great as he was, it just wasn't enough. It just wasn't enough. At least for me, it wasn't. So anyway, so let's we're going to go back to Douglas Trumbull for a minute. So what happened post Brainstorm? What happened after this movie was Douglas Trumbull, he basically retreated to the Berkshire Hills of Western Massachusetts. He became a hermit. He wanted to escape the lawyers, the insurance agents, the creeps, redirecting his career away from traditional Hollywood projects and concentrating instead on developing new technology for movie production and for the exhibition industry and theme park rides, such as the Back to the Future ride at Universal Studios theme park. Until recently, Trumbull's show scam technology could be seen on a theme park type ride at the Luxor Hotel in Las Vegas. In 1994, Trumbull was briefly a vice chairman of IMAX Corporation and president of its ride film division through his involvement in the simultaneous combination and takeover of the Canadian-based private company IMAX Corporation and Trumbull Company. Excuse me. Trumbull spent nearly 2 decades in the Berkshire Hills of Western Massachusetts, starting and running a series of companies involved in effects production and innovation. In 2010, Trumbull used social media to publicize a video on Vimeo and YouTube demonstrating an invention intended to cap the BP oil spill with a strong vacuum seal. Although the video, quote unquote, went viral almost immediately, Trumbull never heard from BP or any of the U.S. government agencies struggling to contain the spill, which left him bemused and mildly annoyed. Quote, "I didn't do it with the hope of compensation," he said. "I did it because I thought it was the moral thing to do," unquote. After nearly 30 years away from Hollywood, Trumbull contributed to special effects work on Terrence Malick's 2011 film, The Tree of Life. Malick, reportedly a Trumbull fan, approached him about the effects work and mentioned that he did not like the look of computer-generated effects,
Reportedly, Trumbull asked, "Why not do it the way we did it on 2001? Recent compositing programs such as Nuke allow practical scenes shot on film to be combined with the fewer of the headaches of the traditional effects work, such as shooting multiple camera passes on a single piece of film, matte passes, and the like." Trumbull eventually signed on as special effects consultant, working with film's effects supervisor Dan Glass. Many of the organic effects processes used in 2001 and Close Encounters were resurrected, such as photographing chemical interactions in petri dishes and releasing paints into water tanks. It was, quote, "a working environment that's almost impossible to come by these days," Trumbull told the Guardian newspaper in July of 2011. Terry wanted to create the opportunity for the unexpected to occur before the camera, then make something of that. He didn't want to use a very stringent design process. He wanted the unexpected phenomenon to occur and use that. In March of 2011, director James Cameron announced plans to film his next Avatar-type 3D feature in a digital version of ShowScan. Cameron has been pushing for movie theaters to adopt higher frame rates to maintain the 3D effect during scenes involving high-speed motion, such as explosions. At 24 frames per second, the 3D effect breaks down, while at 48 or 60 frames per second, it is maintained. 60 frames per second is difficult to achieve with conventional film because of the stress on the medium itself. Recording 60 frames per second using a digital camera is commonplace. In 2012, Douglas Trumbull said he was working on a new science fiction project that is claimed is, quote, "way beyond anything that Peter Jackson and James Cameron have been doing," unquote, which will probably be shot with a camera capable of recording 120 frames per second, twice the speed of its ancestor, ShowScan. Trumbull was a guest speaker at the Massachusetts Production Coalition in February of 2013. And since 2013, Trumbull maintained a workshop and studio on his property in the Berkshire Hills of Massachusetts while he continued to develop new tools for filmmakers. He often traveled to film screenings and seminars and was enjoying a resurgence of his celebrity among film and visual effects enthusiasts. Trumbull seemed grateful for the recognition and reverence accorded by his followers. "They really keep me going," he told the Australian newspaper in February of 2011. "They reinforce some enthusiasm about my work. It's very hard to keep me going because the setbacks were really tragic and difficult." When asked by a reporter how he had managed to persevere in the face of setbacks, Trumbull just laughed and replied that he didn't know, and, quote, "maybe I'm just out of my mind," unquote. In 2014, Trumbull announced that he had developed a new digital capture and projection system called Magi. It shoots and projects native 3D and 4K at 120 frames per second using an innovative technique he called cadence, which he had never been used in previous 3D systems. In 2016, he told Science and Film, "I'm planning on making a feature-length movie that will be almost entirely miniatures, but it will be photorealistic, full-scale, epic in quality, and have the kind of things that I like about Blade Runner and 2001. In 2018, Trumbull provided the visual effects for an executive producer, produced the movie The Man Who Killed Hitler, and then The Book Bigfoot. The same year, he participated in the documentary Trumbull Land, devoted to him and his universe. Trumbull was twice honored by the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers. Most recently, he received the Progress Medal in recognition of numerous contributions in photographic processes and technologies and visual effects and HFR cinematography. Trumbull conducted pioneering biometric research on audience response to HFR imaging and developed a novel cinematic process using 65mm film at 60 frames per second that resulted in a giant screen 70mm image with extraordinary high definition along with smoother and more realistic motion rendering. His work continues to advance stereoscopic 3D and digital HFR imaging, including his 120 frame per second Magi single camera, single projector lens-to-lens system that harnesses existing cameras, post-production tools, and projectors to develop images and sound that are almost indistinguishable from reality. The Progress Medal is the most prestigious SMPTT award, and it recognizes outstanding technical contributions to the process of engineering phases of the motion picture. television, or motion imaging industries. The honor was conferred upon Trumbull at the SMPT Centennial Gala on October 28th, 2016, at the Ray Dolby Ballroom in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. And Trumbull received the International Press Academy's Tesla Award in December of 2011, named in honor of Nikola Tesla, an inventor, scientist, and engineer, who Trumbull noted dryly in a runaway interview, died penniless after lots of people took credit for his work. Oh. He went on to say that he hopes it doesn't turn out that way for him. Trumbull also received the Gordon E. Sawyer Award in February 2012, an honorary Academy Award given to, quote, an individual in the motion picture industry whose technological contributions have brought credit to the industry, as well as the George Méliès Award for the Visual Effects Society in the same month. And yes, he indeed died in Albany, New York on February 7th, 2022, at the age of 79. Yep. And here again, Brainstorm, while being very, very flawed, I still think is a very, very watchable and even a credible movie at times. I mean, I think that the film did suffer from its, tragic history and events that happened during the production. And yet at the same time, I don't think it deserved the lukewarm reception that it got in 1983. I think Trumbull deserved a lot more than that. I think the film deserved a lot more than that. But there you go. Mm-hmm. Truly a pioneer in filmmaking. And yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's why I wanted to do this double commentary, was to honor Douglas Trumbull and his work on the screen. And to tell you the truth, I don't think I chose two better films than these. But like I said, I will be doing Blade Runner later this year. So get ready for that. Yeah, I like how, I mean, you could tell it's North Carolina because of the Wright Brothers National Museum. Mm-hmm. Of course, the very famous First in Flight guys. Yep. I mean, and that's the thing. I really wish Warner Brothers or MGM would come to some kind of an agreement and try to remake Brainstorm, because I do think this movie deserves a remake in honor of Douglas Trumbull. I think that would be awesome. And like I said, this movie could be made 1,000 times better. I'm sure it could. And but I do think it's better than most other virtual reality films, like Strange Days, which came out in 1995, directed by Catherine Bigelow, and written by James Cameron, or executive produced by James Cameron, who was married to her at the time. That has a lot of weird parallels with Brainstorm. And then of course, in 1995, we also had Virtuosity. Later on, we had Johnny Mnemonic, which is a pretty bad film in its own right. I mean, this is one of the few films that I think, was able to successfully incorporate the virtual reality concept into a story. And again, he just, these people just think they can pop light cigarettes whenever they want. I mean, apparently they didn't have any no smoking signs in this laboratory. But anyway, we got approximately 10 minutes left to go at Brainstorm. Anybody in the chat, any final thoughts about the movie? Anything you'd like to share? I know John. I read John's review over at IMDb, and I'm glad John agreed that like Louise Fletcher gave a great performance, and here again, it's not a bad movie. I just think that it falls short of its potential, and here again, I do think a remake could give this film a little bit more added exposure, which I think it really truly needs. Because you try to look at on Twitter or YouTube or anywhere else on the internet, very little has been written about Brainstorm. And that was yet another reason why I wanted to do this commentary, and explore everything that went into the making of this movie. And is it because of the Christopher Walken, Natalie Wood controversy that has kept this movie on the down low? Possibly, but at the same time, here again, if you like and appreciate Douglas Trumbull's work as a effects technician and a supervisor and an artist, this is an absolute must see. I mean, you can't. I mean, and I do think that this film will be seen more this year. Since we lost Douglas Trumbull at the age of 79, and more people are going to be discovering his work. This is one to absolutely consider. I enjoyed the premise and the way it was filmed, but it had pacing problems. Yes, I agree. When the effects were not on screen, the movie slows down for me. That's very true. I mean, that's what I'm saying is that when you don't see the virtual reality effects, I mean, the movie just kind of lays there. There's not a lot of excitement in this movie. I mean, I think that the actors, I think they all did their jobs, but I think here again, I think the only standout is really Louise Fletcher. And like I said, the concepts that have been introduced in this movie, I just think, deserved a lot more attention in other avenues. I mean, like I said, I mean, I really wish we had experienced Douglas Trumbull's full show scan process as it was originally, set to be exhibited with this film, but unfortunately, that just never happened. Very emotional ending, and the end effects are incredible. Yeah, I do agree with that. Mm-hmm. It opened at the Cinerama Dome in Hollywood in 1983, and all my drama class friends went and didn't invite me. So that's why you didn't. That's why you didn't give it a good review. No, I'm just kidding. I'm still smarting. I later caught it at a neighborhood theater. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the flaws do work against it enough to the point where it's just not. I mean, oh god, these effects are so good though. But I mean, here again, I mean, I'm just hoping that this commentary at least gives it a little bit more attention because I do think it deserves a little bit more attention. Not so much because of the Natalie Wood controversy, although that unfortunately is part of it. And I think that anybody that watches Brainstorm and every detail of that mysterious death, and here again, like Dave said earlier on, we'll never know the whole story. We'll never know the whole story. All we know is that she died under, very mysterious and very tragic consequences, circumstances. And, it happened 40 years ago. And, when Robert Wagner passes, I mean, I'm pretty sure that whatever he knows is going to go to his grave. But here again, there are people that think Robert Wagner is absolutely innocent. So, it seems to be split down the middle. Some people think that Robert Wagner is responsible, and there are other people that think he wasn't responsible. But here again, I mean, it shouldn't be the main selling point of Brainstorm. I mean, Natalie Wood's death should not be the selling point for this movie. Like I said, it should be the effects and Douglas Trumbull's work as a director. But here again, because Natalie Wood is such a huge part of this movie, it's almost impossible not to ignore and not to discuss. So here again, I think that it's definitely what's contributed to the film's low profile over the past 40 years. But here again, I think that people should discover it for other reasons aside than Natalie Wood. Oh, wow. Yeah, some of these images near the end are just breathtaking. They're absolutely breathtaking. And yes, I do think that there is enough in Brainstorm to make it watchable for anybody who is not even a science fiction fan. I mean, if you enjoy very cerebral stories that involve, these kind of elements, I think you'll get more out of it than most people will. I mean, but this movie is not going to satisfy everyone. It is what it is. It's flawed, but I do think it's watchable, and I do think it has enough with the effects, to make it for those who are curious. I don't think it will be a waste of time. I honestly don't think it'll be a waste of time. What impressed me about Trumbull is not only his model work, but his visuals full of light and color, with this ending as an example. Yep, absolutely. Mm-hmm. The Wright brothers memorial. Man. So yeah, about 3 minutes left, and this is the ending to Brainstorm, which is here again, a film that I think deserves more attention that has been given to it over the years. And it's, here again, tragedy, absolute tragedy, what happened to Natalie Wood. But the film shouldn't suffer because of that tragedy. And that's my whole argument. I mean, regardless of what you think of the Natalie Wood tragedy, this movie is more than watchable, and it deserves to be seen by many, many more people out there. Absolutely. But here's our cast. Here's our cast for Brainstorm. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight for both of these commentaries, for Silent Running and Brainstorm. And just to let everybody know, my next audio commentary, which I cannot wait to execute, will be next Friday night, May 27th. I will be doing a 40th anniversary commentary for the Taylor Hackford film, An Officer and a Gentleman, starring Richard Gere and Deborah Winger and Louis Gossett Jr. And I chose that specific day for An Officer and a Gentleman because that will be Louis Gossett Jr.'s birthday. He'll be turning 87 on that day, and I think that's a perfect movie to do. Also, as we open up Memorial Day weekend with Top Gun Maverick being released in theaters, because I'm going to be talking a lot about Top Gun and how it was influenced by Officer and a Gentleman. So you don't want to miss that. That'll be next Friday night at 9 p.m. But at any rate, just to say hi to everybody in the chat here real quick before we leave. Rob Gasper, thank you so much. I really liked it. As you said, beefed up story and no Wood tragedy, it would have been first rate. Even so, I enjoyed it. Yes, I mean, here again. Yeah, beautifully said, Rob. Beautifully said. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Dave, you were awesome, dude. Thank you so much. And yes, thank you so much for your lively commentary. Your research is excellent. Thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate that. John, I love you, man. Even if you don't love Brainstorm, I'm glad that you came out tonight. I really am, and listen to me do the commentary for this. Absolutely. And just to say hi to the others who were here before. I believe Katrina was here before, and Jamie Hart, and Dine Breed, and Daniel Shine. Thank you all once again for coming out tonight and supporting me. And listening to my commentaries for both Silent Running and Brainstorm. And like I said, next Friday night, filmed on location in North Carolina. Yep. Next Friday night, like I said, it will be Officer and a Gentleman at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. You don't want to miss it. You really don't want to miss it. Filmed in Super Panavision and Panaflex cameras and lenses by Panavision. Jamie, thank you so much for coming out tonight. It's so wonderful to see you again. Wonderful. A Douglas Trumbull film, Brainstorm, from MGM UA Entertainment. And as right before we go to black, it says, to Natalie. Yes, rest in peace, Natalie Wood, and rest in peace, Douglas Trumbull. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight.